Some women run from monsters. Stella Chen made the fatal mistake of hiding in a monster's den. She thought the kitchen would save her: steam, grease, anonymity. She thought if she kept her head down, her ex would never find her. She was wrong. The night Dominic Russo walked into Santino's and their eyes met over a dropped tray, her invisibility shattered. He was the most dangerous man in the city, and he just decided she was his to protect. Now the question isn't whether her past will catch up to her, it's whether she'll survive what comes after. If you're ready for a story where love is as dangerous as revenge, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The kitchen at Santino's smelled like salvation: garlic simmering in olive oil, fresh basil crushed under chef's knives, tomato sauce reducing to velvet on industrial burners. To everyone else, it was just another upscale Italian restaurant in the heart of the city. To Stella Chen, it was a fortress, a place to disappear. She'd been there 3 weeks. 3 weeks of 14-hour days, blistered hands, and blessed anonymity. 3 weeks of no one asking questions. No one caring that she flinched when doors slammed, or that she always positioned herself where she could see both exits. The other kitchen staff had their own problems, their own reasons for taking cash under the table and not making eye contact with management. Stella liked it that way. She stood at her station, hands moving with practiced efficiency as she prepped vegetables for the evening service. Julienne the carrots, dice the onions. Don't think about yesterday. Don't think about tomorrow. Just the knife, the cutting board, the rhythmic motion that kept her mind from wandering into dangerous territory. "Yo, Stella!" Marco, the sous chef, called from across the kitchen. "We need more stock from the back. You got it?" "On it," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. The walk-in freezer was in the back corridor, past the dishwashing station and the employee bathroom that never quite lost its smell of bleach and desperation. Stella grabbed her jacket, the freezer was kept at a brutal 20 degrees, and pushed through the swinging doors. The corridor was quieter. Removed from the controlled chaos of the kitchen, she could hear her own breathing, feel the weight of the silence pressing against her chest. She hated this hallway. Too isolated, too many blind corners. "Stop it," she told herself. "You're safe here. He doesn't know where you are." But Derek had always been good at finding her. Stella shook her head, forcing the thought away, and yanked open the freezer door. The cold hit her like a physical blow, steam billowing around her as she stepped inside. She found the stock containers quickly. Marco needed the veal stock, the one in the blue containers on the third shelf. She was reaching for it when she heard voices in the corridor, male voices. Unfamiliar. Stella froze, her hand still extended toward the shelf. Through the small window in the freezer door, she could see 2 men in expensive suits standing near the kitchen entrance. They weren't customers. Customers didn't come back here. And they definitely weren't kitchen staff. One of them was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that looked like it had been carved from granite. The other was leaner, sharp-featured, with eyes that scanned the corridor like a predator assessing territory. "Boss doesn't usually come down during service," the sharp-featured one was saying. "He wants to see the place for himself," Granite Face replied. "After what happened at the Newark location, he's not taking chances." Stella's pulse quickened. Boss? They were talking about the owner. In 3 weeks, she'd never seen him. Santino's was managed by a woman named Gloria, who asked no questions and expected none in return. That arrangement had suited Stella perfectly. She started to ease back toward the freezer's rear, thinking she could wait them out, when her foot caught on a raised floor panel. She stumbled, catching herself against the shelf. The movement sent one of the blue containers tumbling forward. Time seemed to slow. She watched the container fall, watched it hit the edge of the shelf, watched it bounce once, and then crash to the floor with a sound that echoed through the freezer like a gunshot. The voices in the corridor stopped. "What was that?" Sharp Features said. Stella's heart hammered against her ribs. She pressed herself against the back wall, praying they'd assume it was nothing, that they'd move on, that... The freezer door opened. Granite Face stepped inside first, his hand instinctively going to something beneath his jacket. His eyes scanned the freezer, landing on the spilled stock and then on Stella. "Well," he said. "What do we have here?" "I'm sorry," Stella said quickly, holding up her hands. "I was just getting stock for service. I didn't mean to..." "Who are you?" Sharp Features appeared behind his partner. his eyes narrowing. Stella, I work in prep. I'm sorry, I'll clean this up. I didn't know anyone was. It's fine, Vincent. The third voice cut through the freezer like a blade, low, controlled, carrying an authority that made both men immediately step aside. And then he walked in. Dominic Russo. Stella had never seen a photograph of him. The owner of Santino's was famously camera shy, but she knew who he was the moment their eyes met. It wasn't just the way Vincent and Granite Face deferred to him, or the cut of his suit that probably cost more than she used to make in a month. It was something in his presence, a kind of gravitational pull that made the freezer seem suddenly smaller. He was younger than she'd expected. Mid-30s, maybe. Dark hair swept back from a face that was all sharp angles and harder edges. The kind of face that would be handsome if it wasn't so carefully controlled, so deliberately unreadable. But it was his eyes that stopped her cold, dark, intelligent, and currently fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to run. "Mr. Russo," she managed. "I'm sorry, I didn't know you were... You're bleeding." It took her a moment to process what he'd said. Then she looked down and realized he was right. When she'd stumbled, she must have caught her hand on something sharp. Blood was welling from a cut on her palm, dripping onto the freezer floor. "Oh," she said stupidly. "I didn't..." She tried to step forward, but her foot was still caught on that damn floor panel. She pitched forward, her injured hand flying out to catch herself, and instead found herself caught by Dominic Russo. He moved faster than she would have thought possible for a man his size, stepping in and catching her before she could hit the ground. His hands were steady, one on her arm, one at her waist, holding her upright with a casual strength that sent a jolt of something she couldn't name through her entire body. For a moment they were frozen there. His face was inches from hers. She could see the faint scar along his jawline, the way his eyes weren't quite black but a very dark brown, the slight flare of his nostrils as he... Was he smelling her hair? "Careful," he said quietly. His voice did something to her, something that made her want to step closer, even as every instinct screamed at her to run. This was a man who commanded rooms, who made grown men step aside with a single word. This was a man who was dangerous in ways Derek could only dream about. And she was standing in his arms in a freezer, bleeding all over his very expensive suit. "I'm so sorry," she said, trying to pull away. "Your jacket is replaceable." He didn't let go immediately. Instead, his eyes traveled over her face with a scrutiny that felt almost physical. "You're new." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. 3 weeks. "And you're working prep?" "Yes." "Under Gloria?" "Yes." His thumb moved slightly against her waist. She didn't think he realized he was doing it, and she fought the urge to either flinch away or lean into the touch. She'd spent 6 months training herself not to want any man's hands on her, 6 months learning that touch meant pain, that gentleness was a lie, that, "You're afraid of me." Stella's breath caught. It wasn't a question this time either, but a statement of fact delivered in that same quiet, controlled voice. "I don't know you," she said carefully. Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, maybe, or recognition. A diplomatic answer. He released her then, stepping back smoothly. The loss of contact felt almost shocking, like stepping from warmth into cold. Stella immediately wrapped her arms around herself, trying to still the trembling that wanted to start in her hands. "Vincent, get the first aid kit from Gloria's office," Dominic said without looking away from Stella. "And have someone clean this up. Boss, we need to... now." Vincent disappeared immediately. Granite Face hesitated, looking between Dominic and Stella like he was trying to solve a complicated equation. And then he too stepped out of the freezer, leaving Stella alone with the most dangerous man she'd ever met. "Let me see your hand," Dominic said. "It's fine. Really, I should get back to prep. Stella." The way he said her name made it sound like he'd known it his whole life instead of learning it 30 seconds ago. "Your hand." She held it out reluctantly. The cut was deeper than she'd thought, a clean slice across her palm that was still bleeding steadily. Dominic took her hand in both of his touch surprisingly gentle as he examined the wound. "You'll need stitches," he said. "I can't afford..." "I'll take care of it." "Mr. Russo, I can't accept..." "You were injured in my restaurant. I'll take care of it." He looked up at her, and she realized he was still holding her hand. That wasn't a request. There it was again. That tone that made it very clear he was used to being obeyed. Stella felt something in her bristle. She'd spent 6 months running from a man who thought he could tell her what to do, but something in Dominic's eyes stopped the reflex cold. He wasn't Derek. This wasn't control born of insecurity or rage. This was simply certainty. The absolute confidence of a man who knew exactly what he was and made no apologies for it. "Okay," she heard herself say. Vincent returned with the first aid kit. Dominic released her hand. Again, that strange sense of loss, and stepped back. "Take her to Dr. Castellano," he told Vincent. "Tell him I sent her." "Boss? And make sure she gets home safely afterward." Vincent looked like he wanted to argue, but apparently knew better. "Yes, sir." Dominic turned back to Stella. His eyes traveled over her face one more time, and she had the distinct sense that he was memorizing every detail, filing her away in some mental database for reasons she couldn't begin to guess. "Be careful, Stella," he said quietly. "This isn't the kind of place where you want to draw attention to yourself." And with that cryptic warning, he walked out of the freezer. Stella stood there for a long moment, her hand throbbing, her heart racing, trying to process what had just happened. She'd come to Santino's to disappear, to be invisible, to become just another face in the kitchen, indistinguishable from the dozens of others who passed through. But Dominic Russo had seen her, and somehow she knew that was going to change everything. Dr. Castellano's office was in a building that didn't advertise its medical services. The brass plate beside the door read "Private Consultations," and nothing else. Vincent led her up 3 flights of stairs. No elevator, she noticed, and through a door that required 2 different keys to open. The doctor himself was an older man with kind eyes and hands that had clearly done this sort of thing many, many times. He asked no questions about how she'd been injured, didn't comment on the faint bruises on her wrists that her long sleeves usually covered, just cleaned the wound with efficient gentleness and put in 6 neat stitches. "Keep it dry for 48 hours, he told her. "Come back in a week and I'll remove them. No charge, Mr. Russo's account." Vincent drove her home after that, or rather, to the address she'd given when she started at Santino's, a women's shelter on the east side run by a former social worker named Margaret, who asked even fewer questions than Gloria. She expected Vincent to drop her at the corner, but instead he pulled up directly in front of the building. His eyes scanned the street with the same predatory assessment she'd seen earlier, cataloging exits and threats with practiced ease. "This where you live?" he asked. "Yes." He didn't say anything else, but she could tell he'd filed that information away too, added it to whatever dossier he was undoubtedly building in his mind. "Thank you," Stella said, reaching for the door handle. "For the ride." "Stella." She looked back. Vincent was watching her in the rearview mirror, his sharp features unreadable. "Mr. Russo doesn't usually notice the kitchen staff," he said carefully. "Fact that he noticed you, that means something." I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm telling you a fact." His eyes held hers in the mirror. "He noticed you. And when Mr. Russo notices something, he tends to take an interest. You understand what I'm saying?" Stella's mouth went dry. "I think so." "Good. Because the kind of interest Mr. Russo takes, it's not always comfortable, but it's always for a reason." He paused. "Be smart, Stella. Whatever you're running from, it's probably safer than what you just stumbled into." He drove away before she could respond. Stella stood on the sidewalk, watching his taillights disappear into traffic, Vincent's words echoing in her head. Whatever you're running from, it's probably safer than what you just stumbled into. But he was wrong about that. He had to be. Because nothing could be more dangerous than Derek. Could it? She didn't see Dominic Russo again for 3 days. Life at Santino's returned to its familiar rhythm. Stella kept her head down, did her work, tried not to think about dark eyes and careful hands, and the way her name had sounded in that low, controlled voice. Marco asked about her hand. She told him she'd cut it prepping vegetables. He'd grunted, told her to be more careful, and that was the end of it. No one else mentioned the incident. It was like it had never happened. Except Stella couldn't stop thinking about it. She kept replaying the moment in the freezer, the way Dominic had caught her, the way he'd looked at her like he was seeing something no one else could see, the warning he'd given her. This isn't the kind of place where you want to draw attention to yourself. What had he meant by that? Santino's was just a restaurant. Expensive, well-run, but still just a restaurant. Except it wasn't, was it? Stella had been so desperate for invisibility that she hadn't asked questions, hadn't wondered why Gloria paid in cash, why half the staff looked like they were running from something, why men in expensive suits sometimes came through the back entrance after the restaurant closed. She'd been so focused on hiding from Derek that she hadn't considered what she might be hiding in. It was Friday night, the busiest night of the week, when everything changed. The kitchen was controlled chaos, tickets streaming from the printer, Marco calling orders, the line cooks moving in synchronized precision, plating dish after dish. Stella was running expo, checking each plate for perfection before it went out to the dining room. She was in the zone, that state of focused intensity where nothing existed but the next plate, the next order, the next perfect execution. So focused that she almost didn't hear the commotion at the back door. Almost. "I said the boss isn't here," someone was saying, a voice she didn't recognize. "You need to leave." "I know she's here." That voice she did recognize. It hit her like ice water, freezing her in place. "I know you're hiding her, and I want her back. Now." Derek. Stella's vision tunneled. The plate in her hand, perfectly arranged osso buco, garnished with gremolata, suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. She set it down carefully, her stitched hand trembling. He'd found her. Of course he'd found her. He always found her. "Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time to leave." "Fuck off, Stella!" Derek's voice rose to a shout. "I know you're in there. Get your ass out here." The kitchen had gone quiet. Everyone was looking toward the back corridor, toward the sound of Derek's voice getting louder, more aggressive. Stella saw Marco reach for his phone, probably to call the police, but her body was already moving. She couldn't let this happen. Couldn't let Derek make a scene, get the police involved, draw the kind of attention that would get her fired. She needed this job, needed the invisibility it provided. "I'll handle it," she heard herself say. "Stella?" Marco started. "It's fine. It's someone I know. I'll handle it." She walked toward the back corridor on legs that didn't feel like her own, through the swinging doors, past the dish station, toward the raised voices and the man who'd taught her that love was just another word for ownership. Derek was being held back by two men she didn't recognize, more of the expensive suit variety, like Vincent and Granite Face. But these two looked less polished, more overtly threatening, the kind of men who didn't need to hide what they were. Derek himself looked exactly as she remembered, handsome in a sharp-featured way that had once made her heart race for very different reasons, well-dressed, charming, and absolutely furious. "There she is," he said when he saw her. His smile was all teeth. "Baby, I've been looking everywhere for you." "Derek?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "You need to leave." "Leave?" He laughed, the sound harsh and ugly. "You disappear for 6 months. I finally track you down to this shithole, and you want me to leave?" "Yes." "We need to talk." "No." "Stella." His voice dropped into that tone she knew too well. Reasonable, concerned. The voice he used right before things got bad. "I know you're upset. I know I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can fix us. Just come home with me and we'll—" I said no. Something flickered in his eyes, something dark and dangerous that made her take an involuntary step back. "You don't get to say no to me," he said quietly. "You're mine." "She's not." The new voice came from behind her, low, controlled, carrying that same authority she remembered from the freezer. Stella turned to find Dominic Russo standing in the corridor. He looked different than he had 3 days ago. No suit jacket, just a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. They were fixed on Derek with an expression that made the temperature in the corridor seem to drop 20 degrees. "Who the fuck are you?" Derek demanded. Dominic didn't answer him. Instead, he looked at Stella. "Is this man bothering you?" Such a simple question, such a normal question, the kind any reasonable person might ask. But the way Dominic asked it, the absolute certainty in his voice that he would handle whatever answer she gave him, made Stella's throat close up. "Yes," she whispered. Dominic nodded once. Then he looked at the two men holding Derek. Get him out of here, he said quietly, and make sure he understands that if he comes back, we'll have a very different conversation. The two men started dragging Derek toward the exit. He struggled, shouting threats and obscenities, promising that this wasn't over, that Stella belonged to him, that, wait! Dominic's single word stopped everyone cold. He walked forward, each step measured and deliberate, until he was standing directly in front of Derek. The height difference was minimal, but somehow Dominic seemed to tower over him. Listen very carefully, Dominic said. His voice so quiet, Stella had to strain to hear it. That woman is under my protection now. Do you understand what that means? Your protection? Derek laughed, though it sounded forced. Who the hell do you think you are? Someone you don't want as an enemy. Dominic leaned in slightly. Come near her again, and you'll find out exactly why. The threat hung in the air like a blade. Derek's bravado flickered, replaced by something that might have been fear. He looked at the two men holding him, at Dominic's cold expression, at Stella standing frozen in the corridor. This isn't over, he said, but his voice had lost its edge. Yes, Dominic said quietly. It is. They dragged Derek out. Stella could hear him shouting all the way to the street, his voice eventually fading into the noise of Friday night traffic. The corridor fell silent. Stella stood there, her stitched hand throbbing, her whole body trembling with adrenaline and relief and terror all mixed together. She'd been found. Derek had found her. And now... Stella. Dominic was standing in front of her. When had he moved? She hadn't seen him approach. Are you all right? He asked. She tried to speak, but her voice wouldn't work. Her hands were shaking, her legs were shaking, everything was shaking. Hey! His hand came up to cup her face, the gesture so gentle it made her want to cry. Breathe, just breathe. She tried. Drew in one shuddering breath, then another, focused on the warmth of his hand against her cheek, the steady concern in his dark eyes. I'm sorry, she managed finally. I didn't mean to bring trouble here. I'll leave. I'll quit. I just need to... You're not going anywhere. But Derek won't be a problem. The certainty in his voice was absolute. I meant what I said. You're under my protection now. Stella shook her head, trying to clear it. You don't understand. He's not going to stop. He never stops. And I can't ask you to... You're not asking. I'm telling you. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, the touch sending sparks through her entire nervous system. Whatever you're running from, whatever brought you to my restaurant, to my kitchen, it stops now. Do you understand? She should argue. Should tell him this wasn't his problem. Should gather what little dignity she had left and walk away before she pulled this dangerous, powerful man into her mess. But the truth was, she was tired. So tired of running. So tired of being afraid. So tired of looking over her shoulder and sleeping with one eye open and knowing that no matter how far she ran, Derek would always find her. And Dominic Russo was looking at her like he could see all of that, like he understood exactly what she wasn't saying, like he'd decided, with that same absolute certainty, that he was going to fix it. Okay, she whispered. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. Good. Now, I think you're done for tonight. Vincent will take you home. I need to finish my shift. Stella. That tone again. The one that made it clear this wasn't a negotiation. You just had a traumatic experience. You're going home, you're going to rest, and tomorrow, we're going to have a conversation about how to keep you safe. Understood? She wanted to argue, wanted to assert some measure of independence, prove that she didn't need a man, any man, to rescue her. But the truth was, she was shaking so hard she could barely stand. And Dominic's hand was still on her face, warm and steady, and somehow making her feel safer than she'd felt in months. Understood, she said. He nodded, called for Vincent, who appeared with that supernatural speed that suggested he'd been waiting just out of sight. Gave him instructions in a low voice that Stella couldn't quite hear. Before she left, Dominic caught her hand, the injured one, and looked at it with a frown. Did Castellano take care of this properly? Yes, he was very kind. Good. He didn't release her hand immediately. Instead, his fingers traced the edge of the bandage with a gentleness that seemed at odds with everything else about him. Go home, Stella. Get some rest. I'll see you tomorrow. It sounded like a promise, or maybe a threat. Stella wasn't sure which scared her more. The shelter was quiet when Vincent dropped her off. Margaret met her at the door. She must have called ahead, with her no-nonsense expression and a cup of chamomile tea. "You all right, honey?" she asked, leading Stella up to her small room on the third floor. "I don't know," Stella admitted. "That man who came looking for you, he won't be back." At least she hoped he wouldn't be. Dominic had seemed very certain. Someone handled it. Margaret's eyes narrowed. What kind of someone? Stella thought about how to answer that. How to explain Dominic Russo, who'd appeared in her life like a storm, who'd declared her under his protection like he had the right, who'd looked at Derek like he was deciding whether violence was worth the effort. "A dangerous someone," she said finally. "Honey, are you jumping from the frying pan into the fire?" Maybe. Probably. Stella didn't know anymore. "I don't think he'll hurt me," she said, which wasn't really an answer, but it was all she had. Margaret sighed, but didn't push. She left Stella alone with the tea and instructions to come find her if she needed anything. Stella sat on her narrow bed, sipping chamomile and staring at her bandaged hand. 6 stitches from a cut in a freezer. An accidental meeting with a man who seemed to exist in a different realm from normal people. A declaration of protection that should have terrified her, but instead made her feel... What did she feel? Relief, yes. Terror, absolutely. But also something else. Something she didn't quite have a name for. The way Dominic had looked at her. Really looked at her, seen past the kitchen uniform and the careful invisibility to the fear she was trying so hard to hide. The way he'd touched her face with such gentleness, even while radiating the kind of controlled violence that had made Derek, who'd never backed down from anyone, retreat. "You're under my protection now." Like it was already decided, like she had any choice in the matter. Stella should be angry about that, should resent the implication that she needed protecting, that she couldn't handle her own problems. 6 months ago, she would have been furious. But 6 months ago, she hadn't been running for her life. Hadn't learned the hard way that sometimes being strong wasn't enough. That sometimes the monsters won, no matter how hard you fought. Her phone buzzed. She'd almost forgotten she had it. A burner she'd bought at a convenience store, used only for work. Only Gloria and Marco had the number. The text was from an unknown number. "This is Dominic. Vincent gave me your contact information. I hope you don't mind." Stella stared at the screen, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. "How are you feeling?" The next message came. She should ignore it. Should put the phone down and draw whatever boundaries she could before this thing, whatever this thing was, got any more complicated. Instead, she found herself typing, "I'm okay. Thank you for earlier." The response came almost immediately. "You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. You didn't have to help me." "I did, actually." Stella frowned at her phone. "Why?" The typing indicator appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. She could almost see him, wherever he was, choosing his words carefully. "Because you looked at me in that freezer like you were seeing a person, not a monster." Stella's breath caught. She read the message 3 times, trying to understand what he was really saying. "I don't think you're a monster," she typed back. "You should. Maybe. But I don't." Another long pause, then, "Get some rest, Stella. We'll talk tomorrow." She should leave it there. Should say goodnight and put the phone away and try to process everything that had happened. Instead, "Dominic?" "Yes?" "Thank you. Really. You're welcome." "Good night." "Good night." Stella set the phone down and finished her tea. Outside her window, the city hummed with Friday night energy, cars and voices and music bleeding together into white noise. Somewhere out there, Derek was probably planning his next move. Somewhere out there, danger was circling closer. But for tonight, for this moment, Stella felt something she hadn't felt in 6 months. Safe. Even if that safety came wrapped in the protection of a man who everyone else seemed to fear. Even if accepting his help meant stepping into a world she didn't understand. Even if... Her phone buzzed again. "I meant what I said. You're under my protection now. That means Derek won't touch you. Neither will anyone else. Sleep well." Stella looked at the message for a long time. At the certainty in those words, the absolute confidence that he could keep that promise, she should be terrified. Instead, she found herself smiling as she turned off the light and closed her eyes. For the first time in 6 months, Stella Chen slept through the night without nightmares. And in a penthouse across the city, Dominic Russo sat in his study, looking at his phone, wondering what the hell he was doing getting involved with a woman who had fear in her eyes and secrets in her past. Wondering why, when she'd looked at him in that freezer, he'd felt something shift inside him. Something he'd thought was long dead. Wondering why the thought of anyone hurting her made him want to burn the entire city down. He had a lot of experience with wanting things, power, respect, control. But this fierce, protective instinct that had flared to life the moment Stella Chen had fallen into his arms, this was different. This was dangerous. And Dominic Russo had never been good at walking away from danger. Stella woke to sunlight streaming through the thin curtains of her shelter room and the smell of coffee drifting up from the communal kitchen. For a moment, one blissful, disoriented moment, she forgot where she was, forgot everything that had happened. Then she saw her bandaged hand resting on top of the blanket, and it all came rushing back. Derek. The confrontation. Dominic. You're under my protection now. She reached for her phone, half expecting the messages from last night to have been some kind of stress-induced hallucination. But no, there they were, a text thread with a number that could only belong to one person. A new message had come in an hour ago. Vincent will pick you up at 10. We need to talk. Stella glanced at the clock. 9:47. She scrambled out of bed, her heart racing. 13 minutes to shower, dress, and make herself presentable for a meeting with a man who apparently ran half the city from the shadows. 13 minutes to figure out what the hell she was going to say when he asked her about Derek, about why she was hiding, about all the things she'd spent 6 months trying not to talk about. She made it downstairs with 2 minutes to spare, her hair still damp, wearing the only clean clothes she had left, jeans and a sweater that had seen better days. Margaret was in the kitchen, pretending not to watch as Stella poured coffee into a to-go cup with shaking hands. "You sure about this, honey?" Margaret asked quietly. "No," Stella admitted, "but I don't think I have much choice." "There's always a choice." "Is there?" Stella met her eyes. "Derek found me, Margaret. He found me even though I did everything right. Changed my number, used cash, stayed off social media, and he still found me." "So you're going to what? Let some other man control your life instead?" The words stung because they hit too close to the truth. But before Stella could respond, a sleek black car pulled up in front of the shelter. Vincent stepped out, his sharp features unreadable as always. "That's my ride," Stella said. Margaret caught her arm. "If you need out, if things get bad, you call me, day or night. You understand?" Stella hugged her quickly. "I understand, thank you." Vincent opened the car door without a word. Stella slid into the back seat, her coffee clutched in both hands like a shield. The door closed with an expensive-sounding thunk, sealing her into leather and tinted windows and the faint scent of something expensive. "Where are we going?" she asked as Vincent pulled into traffic. "Mr. Russo's office." "I thought we'd meet at the restaurant." Vincent's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. "Mr. Russo doesn't conduct personal business at Santino's." Personal business. The word settled over Stella like a weight. Whatever this conversation was going to be, it had moved beyond employer and employee, beyond the simple kindness of helping someone in trouble. This was something else entirely. They drove through the city, moving from the shabby neighborhoods of the east side into progressively cleaner, wealthier areas. Eventually, Vincent pulled up in front of a building that looked like it had been carved from black glass and steel, all sharp angles and reflective surfaces that seemed to reject the very idea of transparency. 20th floor, Vincent said, handing her a keycard. "Mr. Russo is expecting you." The elevator was as expensive as everything else. Mirrors and brass and a control panel that required the keycard just to access certain floors. Stella watched the numbers climb, her reflection multiplying in the mirrors until there seemed to be dozens of her, all looking equally terrified. The doors opened directly into a reception area that was more like a luxury apartment than an office, Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, minimalist furniture that probably cost more than a car. And standing with his back to her, looking out at the view, was Dominic Russo. He'd clearly been awake for hours. His suit was perfectly pressed, his hair precisely styled. But when he turned at the sound of the elevator, Stella saw something in his eyes that looked almost like relief. "You came," he said. "You said we needed to talk." "I did, but that doesn't mean you had to come." He gestured to a seating area near the windows. "Please, sit." Stella crossed the room on legs that felt steadier than they had any right to. She chose the chair rather than the sofa, keeping distance felt important somehow, and waited while Dominic settled into the chair across from her. Up close, in the morning light, she could see the signs of a sleepless night, faint shadows under his eyes, a tension in his jaw that suggested he'd been grinding his teeth. He looked like a man who'd spent the night wrestling with a problem he couldn't quite solve. "How's your hand?" he asked. Stella looked down at the bandage. "Better. The stitches itch." "That's normal. Castellano does good work." He paused. "How are you?" "Really?" The question, delivered in that careful tone, made something in her chest tighten. When was the last time someone had asked her that and actually wanted to know the answer? "Scared," she admitted. "Confused. Grateful. All of it at once." Dominic nodded slowly. "That's fair. What happened last night, Derek showing up like that? It shouldn't have happened. My security should have caught him before he got anywhere near the kitchen." "It's not your fault." "It is, actually." His eyes held hers. "You work in my restaurant. That makes you my responsibility. And I failed to protect you." "You didn't know I needed protecting." "I should have." He leaned forward slightly. "I knew something was wrong the moment I saw you in that freezer. The way you held yourself. The fear in your eyes when you looked at me. I've seen enough people running from something to recognize the signs." Stella's throat felt tight. "And you decided to... what? Take me on as a project?" "No." The word was quiet but firm. "I decided that whatever you're running from, you shouldn't have to run alone." "You don't even know me." "I know enough." Dominic's gaze didn't waver. "I know you're smart enough to disappear completely, but brave enough to confront your ex when he showed up. I know you're good at your work. Marco says you're the best prep cook he's had in years. I know you tip the dishwashers out of your own pocket even though you're barely making minimum wage. And I know that when you look at me, you see a person instead of a monster. That's more than most people manage." The words landed like stones in still water, sending ripples through everything Stella thought she understood about this situation. "What do you want from me?" she asked quietly. "The truth." Dominic sat back, his posture deceptively relaxed. "Tell me about Derek. Tell me what you're running from. And then let me help you." Stella's first instinct was to refuse, to maintain the walls she'd built so carefully, keep her secrets close, protect herself the only way she knew how. But Dominic was looking at her with those dark, intelligent eyes, and she found herself remembering the feel of his hands catching her, the gentleness of his touch on her face, the absolute certainty in his voice when he'd told Derek to leave. "You're under my protection now. Maybe it was time to stop running alone." "We met 2 years ago," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was working as a bartender at a hotel downtown. Derek was a guest. In town for business, charming, attentive. He made me feel seen in a way I'd never experienced before." Dominic said nothing, just listened with an intensity that made her feel like every word mattered. "We started dating. Long distance at first. He lived in Chicago, but he'd fly in every few weeks. Flowers, expensive dinners, weekend trips. It felt like a fairy tale." Stella's laugh was bitter. "I should have known better. Fairy tales aren't real." "When did it change?" 6 months in, he asked me to move to Chicago. Said he loved me, wanted me close, would take care of everything. I quit my job, left my apartment, packed up my whole life." She stared at her bandaged hand. "The first time he hit me was 3 days after I moved in. I'd made dinner, lasagna, but I used ricotta instead of cottage cheese. He said I wasn't listening to him, that he'd specifically told me how his mother made it. I tried to apologize, and he just snapped." Dominic's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes went very cold. How long? A year and a half. It got worse over time. He was smart about it. Never anywhere visible. Never bad enough that I'd need a hospital. Just enough to remind me who was in control. Stella's voice cracked. He'd apologize after. Bring me flowers. Tell me he loved me, that I just made him so crazy sometimes, that if I'd just listened better, it wouldn't happen. And I believed him. For so long, I believed him. What changed? He started talking about marriage, about kids, and I realized that if I didn't leave, I never would. That one day he'd go too far and I'd end up a statistic. She met Dominic's eyes. So I planned. Saved money from the household account he didn't monitor as closely. Got a burner phone, waited until he went on a business trip, and then I ran. Took a bus to New York, found the shelter, started over. And he's been looking for you since. He can't stand losing. Losing control, losing possessions. Because that's what I was to him. A possession. Stella's hands were trembling. She clasped them together to make them stop. I thought I'd been careful enough. Thought I'd finally gotten far enough away. But he found me anyway. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was very controlled, very careful. The kind of careful that suggested he was keeping a tight leash on something dangerous. He won't find you again, he said. You can't know that. I can. He stood, walking to the windows, his hands in his pockets. I'm going to be very honest with you, Stella, about who I am and what I do. Because you need to understand the situation you're in. Stella's heart rate kicked up. Okay. Santino's is a legitimate business. It makes money, it pays taxes, it employs people legally. But it's also a front. He turned to face her. I run what you might call a business empire. Some of it's legal. A lot of it isn't. I have connections, resources, and influence that extend far beyond a restaurant kitchen. You're a criminal, Stella said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Among other things, yes. No shame, no justification. Just fact. I'm telling you this because if you accept my protection, you need to understand what that means. It means Derek won't touch you, not because of some restraining order or police intervention, but because people who cross me tend to face consequences they don't recover from. You'd hurt him. If necessary. Dominic's eyes were unflinching. Would that bother you? Stella thought about Derek's hands around her throat, the way he'd smiled while she struggled to breathe, the promises he'd made about what he'd do if she ever tried to leave. No, she said quietly. It wouldn't. Something flickered in Dominic's expression. Not quite approval, but close. Good. Because I meant what I said last night. You're under my protection now. But that protection comes with conditions. What kind of conditions? You move out of the shelter. It's not secure enough. He held up a hand before she could protest. I own a building about 20 minutes from here. Secure entrance, doorman, cameras. I'll set you up with an apartment. Nothing extravagant, just safe. You keep working at Santino's if you want, but you check in with Vincent daily. And if Derek or anyone else comes looking for you, you tell me immediately. Stella's mind raced. Moving into an apartment owned by Dominic Russo, being under his constant surveillance, trading one form of control for another. What do you get out of this? She asked. The question seemed to catch him off guard. What do you mean? Men don't do things for free. Derek taught me that. Everything has a price. So what's yours? Dominic crossed the room, stopping close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. He looked at her for a long moment, something complex and unreadable moving behind his carefully controlled expression. Peace, he said finally. Peace? I've done things, Stella. Bad things. Necessary things, but bad nonetheless. I've hurt people. Destroyed lives. Built an empire on fear and violence and the ability to be more ruthless than anyone else in the room. His hand came up, hovering near her face but not quite touching. And then you fell into my arms in a freezer, and you looked at me like I was just a man. Not a monster, not a threat, just a person. Do you have any idea how rare that is? Stella's breath caught. Dominic, I want to protect you because you make me feel human, he said quietly. Because when you smiled at me last night before you left, something in my chest hurt, in a way I didn't know it could anymore. Because the thought of Derek putting his hands on you makes me want to burn Chicago to the ground. His hand finally made contact, cupping her face with the same gentleness she remembered. That's my price. Let me be the kind of man who protects people instead of hurting them. Just this once. Stella should be terrified. This man had just admitted to being a criminal, to having hurt people, to being capable of violence on a scale she couldn't imagine. Every instinct honed by 6 months of running should be screaming at her to leave. Instead, she found herself leaning into his touch. "Okay," she whispered. Dominic's eyes searched hers. "Okay? I'll move into the apartment. I'll check in with Vincent. I'll let you protect me." She took a shaky breath. "But I need you to promise me something." "What?" "Promise you won't lie to me. Not about who you are or what you do. I can handle the truth. I can't handle being kept in the dark. I promise." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "Anything else?" "Yeah. If I ask you to back off, you back off. No arguments, no negotiation. My life, my choice." For a moment she thought he might refuse. She could see the instinct to control, to protect, to make decisions for her own good warring in his expression. But then something shifted, and he nodded. "Deal," he said. "Though I reserve the right to argue my case before I back off." Stella laughed, surprised by the sound. "That seems fair." Dominic smiled, a real smile this time, small but genuine, and the expression transformed his entire face, made him look younger, less dangerous, more human. "Vincent will take you to the apartment," he said, stepping back. "It's furnished, but if you need anything, clothes, toiletries, whatever, tell him and he'll arrange it." "I can't just accept all this." "Stella." That tone again. "Let me do this, please." The please got her. Dominic Russo, who commanded rooms with a word and made dangerous men nervous, was asking for permission to keep her safe. "Okay," she said again. He walked her to the elevator, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. The touch was casual, almost absent-minded, but it sent electricity racing up her spine. "One more thing," Dominic said as the elevator doors opened. "Tomorrow night, there's a dinner. Business associates, semi-formal. I'd like you to come with me." Stella blinked. "Why?" "Because I want you there. And because if you're going to be under my protection, people need to see that. Understand what it means." His eyes held hers. "Also because I'd enjoy your company. I don't have anything to wear to a semi-formal dinner. I'll have something sent to your apartment." He smiled slightly. "Say yes, Stella." She should say no, should maintain some boundary, some sense of independence. But the way he was looking at her, the quiet hope in his voice, made refusal impossible. "Yes," she said. The smile he gave her could have lit the entire city. Vincent was waiting in the car, his expression carefully neutral as Stella slid into the back seat. They drove in silence for several minutes before he spoke. "You know what you're doing?" he asked. "No," Stella admitted. "Do you?" "With Mr. Russo, it's hard to tell sometimes." Vincent's eyes met hers in the mirror. "But I've worked for him for 10 years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." "How does he look at me?" "Like you're the answer to a question he forgot he was asking." The apartment building was exactly as Dominic had described. Secure, modern, understated. The doorman nodded to Vincent like he'd been expecting them, and they rode up to the 8th floor in silence. The apartment itself was small but beautiful. Hardwood floors, large windows, furniture that managed to be both comfortable and elegant. There was a bedroom with a queen bed already made up, a bathroom with more counter space than she knew what to do with, and a kitchen that made her chef's heart sing. "Mr. Russo had some things delivered," Vincent said, gesturing to several shopping bags on the bed. "Clothes, basics. If you need anything else, just call." But he handed her a new phone, much nicer than her burner, and a key card for the building. "My number's already programmed in," he continued, "along with Mr. Russo's, emergency services, and the front desk. Security here is good, but if anything feels wrong, you call immediately. Understood?" "Understood." Vincent nodded and turned to leave, then paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I think you're good for him. He's been different since he met you, lighter." Before Stella could respond, he was gone. She spent the rest of the day exploring her new space, trying on the clothes Dominic had sent. All in her size, all in styles that suited her, and trying to process the fact that her life had completely transformed in less than 24 hours. That evening, as the sun set over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, her phone buzzed. "How's the apartment?" Dominic's message asked. "Beautiful, thank you." "Good. Dinner tomorrow is at 8. Vincent will pick you up at 7:30. "Okay." A pause, then, "Are you having second thoughts?" Stella looked around the apartment, at the evidence of Dominic's care in every detail. The flowers on the kitchen counter, the coffee maker that matched the one she'd mentioned admiring at Santino's, the cookbook on the shelf that she'd once told Marco she wanted to buy. "No," she typed back. "Are you?" "Never." Stella smiled and set the phone down. Outside her window, the city hummed with Saturday night energy. Somewhere out there, Derek was probably still looking for her. Somewhere out there, danger was circling. But for tonight, in this apartment that smelled like vanilla and new beginnings, Stella felt something she'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. The next evening found her standing in front of the bathroom mirror, barely recognizing herself. The dress Dominic had sent was midnight blue silk, simple but elegant, fitting her like it had been made for her. Her hair, freshly washed and styled, fell in soft waves around her shoulders. And for the first time in months, she'd put on makeup, just enough to hide the shadows under her eyes and emphasize the features Derek had spent a year and a half tearing down. She looked beautiful, strong, like someone who belonged in Dominic Russo's world. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. Vincent arrived exactly at 7:30, his sharp features softening slightly when he saw her. "You look nice," he said. "Thank you." Stella grabbed the clutch purse that had come with the dress. "Am I going to be completely out of place at this thing?" "Probably a little," Vincent admitted as they walked to the elevator. "But Mr. Russo will make sure you're comfortable. He's good at that when he wants to be." The restaurant where the dinner was being held was the kind of place Stella had only ever seen from the outside, all crystal chandeliers and white tablecloths and waiters who moved like dancers. Vincent led her through the main dining room to a private area in the back, where a table was set for 8. Dominic was there already, talking to a silver-haired man in an expensive suit. But the moment Stella entered the room, his attention shifted entirely to her. The look in his eyes made her forget how to breathe. He crossed to her in 3 long strides, his hands finding hers and raising them to his lips in a gesture that should have seemed old-fashioned but instead felt intimate. "You're stunning," he said quietly, his lips brushing her knuckles. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she managed. He did. The suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, making him look like he'd stepped out of some impossibly attractive crime drama. But it was the way he looked at her, like she was the only person in the room, that made her knees weak. "Come," he said, keeping her hand in his. "I'll introduce you." The next hour was a blur of names and faces and careful conversations. The other guests were clearly business associates, some legitimate, some probably less so. They all treated Dominic with a mixture of respect and wariness that suggested they knew exactly what he was capable of. And they treated Stella with careful courtesy, clearly trying to figure out who she was and what she meant to him. Dominic kept her close through it all, his hand never far from the small of her back, his attention constantly returning to her. When she felt overwhelmed, he seemed to sense it, steering conversations away or creating space for her to breathe. It was during the main course that things shifted. A man Stella hadn't met arrived late, younger than the others, handsome in a sharp-edged way that reminded her uncomfortably of Derek. His name was Marcus, and from the way everyone tensed when he entered, he was someone important, and someone Dominic didn't particularly like. "Russo," Marcus said, sliding into his seat. "Sorry I'm late. Business ran long." "Marcus." Dominic's tone was polite but cold. "Glad you could join us." Marcus's eyes landed on Stella, and something predatory flickered in his expression. "And who's this beautiful creature? I don't believe we've met." "Stella," Dominic said before she could respond. "She's with me." The possessiveness in those 3 words was unmistakable. Marcus heard it too, his smile sharpening. "With you," he repeated. "How unexpected. I didn't realize you'd started collecting strays, Russo." The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. Stella felt Dominic's hand tighten almost imperceptibly on his wine glass. "Careful, Marcus," Vincent said quietly from his seat. But Marcus was either brave or stupid, because he kept talking. "No offense intended. I'm just surprised to see our fearless leader getting soft over. Finish that sentence and you'll regret it." Dominic's voice was very quiet, very controlled, and absolutely lethal. Marcus finally seemed to realize he'd crossed a line. The room had gone silent, everyone watching the confrontation with the kind of fascinated horror usually reserved for car accidents. "I apologize," Marcus said, though he didn't sound particularly sorry. "I meant no disrespect." "To Stella or to me?" Dominic asked. "To both." Dominic studied him for a long moment, and Stella could practically see him making calculations, weighing responses. Finally, he nodded. "Accepted. But let me be very clear." He looked around the table, making sure everyone was paying attention. "Stella is under my protection. That means she is off limits, completely. Anyone who forgets that will answer to me personally. Understood?" A chorus of murmured agreement went around the table. Marcus nodded stiffly, his jaw tight. Stella should probably feel embarrassed or angry at being discussed like property. But the fierce protectiveness in Dominic's voice, the absolute certainty that he would destroy anyone who threatened her, made her feel something else entirely. Safe, cherished, important. The dinner continued, but the easy atmosphere had been broken. People made their excuses early, until finally it was just Stella, Dominic, and Vincent left at the table. "I'm sorry about Marcus," Dominic said quietly. "He's useful in his way, but he forgets his manners." "It's okay," Stella said. "I've dealt with worse." "That doesn't make it acceptable." His hand found hers under the table, fingers threading through hers. "You all right?" "Yeah, actually I am." She squeezed his hand. "Thank you for defending me." "Always." The word was a promise. They left the restaurant together, Dominic's hand still holding hers. Vincent had disappeared to bring the car around, leaving them alone in the cool night air. "Did you mean it?" Stella asked suddenly. "Mean what?" "That I'm under your protection, that anyone who crosses me answers to you." Dominic turned to face her, his hands coming up to frame her face. "Every word." "Why?" "Because in 3 days, you've become important to me." His thumbs brushed her cheekbones. "Because when you smile, I feel like I can breathe properly for the first time in years. Because the thought of someone hurting you makes me want to tear the world apart." "That's intense," Stella whispered. "I'm an intense person." His eyes searched hers. "Is that a problem?" She should say yes, should recognize this for what it was. A man used to controlling everything, trying to add her to his list of possessions. But when Dominic looked at her, she didn't see ownership. She saw something raw and desperate and real. "No," she said, "it's not a problem." He kissed her then, and the world fell away. His lips were surprisingly soft against hers, the kiss gentle despite the intensity she'd seen in his eyes moments before. Dominic's hands cradled her face like she was something precious, something that might break if he wasn't careful. And maybe she was. Maybe they both were, two damaged people finding something whole in each other. When they finally broke apart, Stella's heart was racing and her hands had somehow found their way to his chest, clutching the fabric of his suit jacket. "I should probably apologize for that," Dominic said quietly, though he made no move to step away. "Don't." Stella's voice came out breathier than she intended. "Please don't." Something fierce and possessive flashed in his eyes. "I've wanted to do that since you fell into my arms in that freezer." "That was less than a week ago." "Feels longer." His thumb traced her lower lip, the touch sending shivers down her spine. "Feels like I've known you forever." Vincent's discreet cough from beside the car broke the moment. Dominic stepped back, his expression shifting into something more controlled, though his eyes still held that intensity that made Stella's knees weak. "I should get you home," he said. "You don't have to. I want to." He took her hand, leading her to the car. "Humor me." The drive back to her apartment was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Dominic sat close enough that their thighs touched, his hand still holding hers. Every so often, Stella would catch him watching her, his expression thoughtful. "What are you thinking?" she asked finally. "That I'm in trouble," he admitted. "What kind of trouble?" The kind where I start making decisions with my heart instead of my head. He smiled slightly. It's not something I'm used to. Is that a bad thing? I don't know yet. His fingers tightened around hers. But I'm willing to find out. Vincent pulled up in front of her building. Dominic walked her to the elevator, through the lobby, up to her floor. He waited while she unlocked her door, his presence solid and reassuring behind her. Thank you, Stella said, turning to face him in the doorway. For tonight. For everything. Stella. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. I need you to understand something. What happened tonight with Marcus? That's going to happen again. People are going to test boundaries, try to figure out what you mean to me. Some of them won't be as easily managed. I can handle it. I know you can. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for. His hand lingered against her face. But I need you to promise me something. If anyone makes you uncomfortable, if you feel threatened in any way, you tell me immediately. Not later, not when it's convenient. Immediately. Dominic, promise me. The intensity in his voice made it clear this wasn't negotiable. Stella thought about Derek, about all the times she'd stayed quiet, convinced she could handle it herself. Look where that had gotten her. I promise, she said. He nodded, satisfied. Then, before she could overthink it, he leaned in and pressed a kiss to her forehead, soft, tender, completely at odds with the dangerous man everyone else saw. Sleep well, Stella. You too. She watched him walk back to the elevator, his shoulders relaxing slightly once he thought she couldn't see him anymore. The vulnerability in that small gesture made her chest ache. Inside her apartment, Stella leaned against the closed door and touched her lips, still feeling the ghost of his kiss. Her phone buzzed with a message. Lock the deadbolt. And for the record, that kiss was worth whatever trouble it brings. She smiled and did as he asked, then typed back, Good night, Dominic. Good night, beautiful. The next 2 weeks fell into a pattern that felt almost normal. Stella worked her shifts at Santino's, her stitches came out, and she slowly started to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could have a life again. Derek didn't reappear. No threatening messages, no surprise visits, nothing but blessed silence. Dominic was a constant presence, though not in the smothering way she'd feared. He'd stop by the kitchen during her shifts, ostensibly to check on operations, but really just to see her. They'd talk about food, about the city, about everything and nothing. He made her laugh with dry observations about his business associates. She made him smile with stories about kitchen disasters and culinary near misses. And slowly, carefully, they learned each other. Stella discovered that Dominic took his coffee black, hated mushrooms, and had a weakness for old noir films. That he'd grown up in the neighborhood where Santino's now stood, back when it was rough and dangerous. That he'd built his empire from nothing, using intelligence and ruthlessness in equal measure. He learned that she'd dreamed of being a chef since she was 8, that she'd worked her way through culinary school while juggling 3 jobs, that Derek had convinced her to give up her dream of opening her own restaurant, that she still had that dream, buried deep but not quite dead. They had dinner together 3 times that week, once at an upscale French restaurant where Dominic watched her critique every dish with obvious amusement. Once at a hole-in-the-wall Thai place that she insisted had the best pad see ew in the city. And once in her apartment where she cooked for him and discovered that watching Dominic Russo enjoy her carbonara was more satisfying than any compliment she'd ever received. He kissed her goodnight after each date, but never pushed for more. The restraint was both frustrating and touching, like he was determined to do this right, to give her time to be sure. On the Friday of her second week in the apartment, Stella was prepping mise en place for dinner service when Gloria appeared in the kitchen doorway. Stella, can I see you in my office? The request wasn't unusual. Gloria occasionally pulled staff aside to discuss scheduling or performance, but something in her tone made Stella's stomach clench. She followed Gloria through the back corridors to the small office tucked behind the wine storage. Gloria closed the door and gestured to a chair. Sit. Stella sat, her mind racing through possibilities. Had she done something wrong? Was she being fired? Had Derek... Relax, Gloria said, reading her panic. You're not in trouble, but we need to talk about your situation. My situation? With Mr. Russo. Gloria leaned against her desk, arms crossed. I've been managing this restaurant for 12 years. I've seen a lot of people come through that kitchen, and I've seen Mr. Russo with a lot of women, but I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." Stella's cheeks heated. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." Gloria's expression wasn't unkind, just matter of fact. "And before this goes any further, you need to understand what you're getting into. Mr. Russo is a good man in his way. He's loyal, protective, and surprisingly principled for someone in his line of work. But he's also dangerous. His world is dangerous. And once you're in it, getting out isn't simple." "He told me about his business," Stella said quietly. "About what he does." "Did he tell you about the Castellano family?" The name sounded familiar. Wasn't that the doctor who'd stitched her hand? But the way Gloria said it suggested something more significant. "No," Stella admitted. Gloria sighed. "The Castellanos are one of the old families. They've controlled the waterfront for 3 generations. Mr. Russo's been in negotiations with them for months, trying to expand his operations into their territory. It's delicate work. One wrong move and we're looking at a war." "What does that have to do with me?" "Everything." Gloria's eyes were serious. "The moment Mr. Russo claimed you publicly, you became part of the equation. You're leverage now, a weakness that can be exploited. Do you understand what I'm saying?" Stella's mouth went dry. "You think someone might use me to get to him?" "I think it's inevitable." Gloria moved to sit beside her. "I'm not telling you this to scare you. I'm telling you because you deserve to know what you're walking into. Mr. Russo will protect you. He'd burn the city down before he let anyone hurt you. But protection isn't the same as safety, not in this world." The words settled over Stella like a weight. She thought about the dinner, about Marcus's careful testing of boundaries, about the way the other guests had watched her, calculating, measuring. She'd been so focused on the way Dominic made her feel that she hadn't considered the bigger picture. "What would you do?" Stella asked. "If you were me?" Gloria was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, I'd probably run, find somewhere safe and start over, away from all of this." She paused. "But I'd also regret it for the rest of my life, because what Mr. Russo feels for you, that's real. That's rare. And it's the kind of thing most people spend their whole lives searching for. So I'm damned either way." "Welcome to loving a complicated man," Gloria smiled slightly. "For what it's worth, I think you're good for him. He's been lighter since you arrived, more human. That's worth something." Stella left Gloria's office with her head spinning. She tried to focus on work, on the familiar rhythm of prep and service, but the conversation kept replaying in her mind. She was leverage, a weakness, a target, and she had no idea what to do about it. That evening, Dominic picked her up after her shift. They'd planned to go to dinner, but one look at her face and he changed course. "What's wrong?" he asked as Vincent pulled into traffic. "Gloria talked to me today." Dominic's expression tightened. "About?" "About the Castellanos. About me being leverage." Stella turned to look at him. "You didn't tell me." "No," he admitted. "I didn't." "Why not?" He was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working. "Because I didn't want to scare you away." "So you were just going to let me stumble into danger blind?" "No, I was going to handle it." His eyes met hers. "The Castellano situation is complicated, but it's under control. They won't move against you." "How can you be sure?" "Because they're not stupid. They know that touching you would start a war they can't win." His hand found hers. "You're safe, Stella. I promised you that." "But for how long?" She pulled her hand away, sudden anger flaring. "How long before someone decides I'm worth the risk? How long before your protection isn't enough? It will always be enough. You can't know that." Her voice rose. "You can't promise me safety when you live in a world where people use violence to solve problems, where I'm just another piece on the board." "You're not a piece on the board," Dominic's voice was hard. "You're everything." The words hung in the air between them. Vincent's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror and quickly away, giving them the illusion of privacy. "Then act like it," Stella said quietly. "Stop making decisions for me. Stop hiding things because you think I can't handle them." "I spent a year and a half with a man who controlled every aspect of my life. I won't do that again, not even for you." Dominic looked like she'd slapped him. "I'm nothing like Derek. I know that, but you're still trying to control the situation, control me, because you think it's the best way to keep me safe. And maybe it is, but it's not what I need. Then what do you need? The truth. All of it. The good, the bad, the dangerous. I need to make informed decisions about my own life. She held his gaze. Can you give me that? He was silent for so long she thought he might refuse. Then finally he nodded. Vincent, take us to my place, he said. Boss, now. Dominic's penthouse was everything Stella expected and nothing like it. Yes, it was massive and expensively furnished, with views that stretched across the entire city, but it also felt lived in. Books stacked on tables, a coffee mug left on the kitchen counter, photographs on the mantel that showed a younger Dominic with people who must have been family. He led her to the living room and poured them both drinks, whiskey, neat, before settling into the chair across from her. You want the truth, he said. Here it is. The Castellanos control everything from the river to 8th Avenue. Shipping, unions, construction. It's a lucrative territory, and I want in. We've been negotiating for months, but progress has been slow. They don't trust me, I don't trust them, and we're stuck in a stalemate. Where do I fit in? You don't, not directly. He took a sip of his whiskey. But the moment I claimed you publicly, you became relevant. The Castellanos now know I have something to lose. That changes the dynamic. Makes you look weak, makes me look human. His eyes met hers, which, in this business, amounts to the same thing. Stella processed that. So what happens now? Now we move forward carefully. I continue negotiations, strengthen my position, make it clear that any move against you would be suicide. He leaned forward. But I need you to understand something, Stella. This isn't going to be the last threat. Being with me means living with a certain level of danger. I can minimize it, manage it, but I can't eliminate it completely. I know. Do you? The question was gentle but probing. Because if you walk away right now, I'll understand. I'll make sure you're set up somewhere safe, that Derek never finds you. You can have the life you wanted before all this. Without you, without me, he agreed, and she could hear the pain in those two words. Stella looked at him, really looked at him. At the careful control in his posture, the vulnerability hidden behind dark eyes, the way his hand gripped his glass just a little too tightly. He was offering her an out, even though it was clearly killing him to do it. Derek had never offered her a choice, had never asked what she wanted, what she needed, had taken and taken until there was nothing left of the woman she'd been. But Dominic was asking, was giving her the power to decide her own fate. I'm not going anywhere, she said. His eyes closed briefly. Stella, I'm not. She set down her glass and moved to kneel in front of his chair, taking his hands in hers. You scare me sometimes. This world scares me. But you know what scares me more? The thought of running again. Of spending the rest of my life hiding, always looking over my shoulder, never allowing myself to feel anything because feeling means vulnerability. You could get hurt. I could get hurt crossing the street. I could get hurt going to the grocery store. Derek could find me tomorrow, no matter where I am. She squeezed his hands. At least with you, I'm choosing the danger. I'm walking in with my eyes open. This is insane, Dominic said, but he was pulling her closer. Probably. Stella let him draw her up into his lap, her arms winding around his neck. But I've been playing it safe my whole life. Look where it got me. I don't want you getting hurt because of me. Then don't hurt me. She looked directly into his eyes. Be honest with me. Trust me with the truth. Let me be your partner, not your possession. You could never be a possession. His hands framed her face. You're too strong for that, too fierce. It's part of what I love about you. The word hung in the air between them. Love. He'd said it so casually, like it was simply a fact rather than a declaration. Dominic, I know it's too soon. I know we barely know each other, but I look at you and I see my future. I see the person who makes me want to be better, do better, and I can't walk away from that, even if I should. Stella's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. I'm not asking you to walk away. What are you asking? Kiss me, she whispered, and this time don't stop. The kiss was different from the ones before, deeper, more urgent, filled with weeks of restraint finally breaking. Dominic's hands tangled in her hair, angling her head to deepen the kiss. Stella's fingers clutched at his shoulders, at his neck, trying to get closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Yes, because once we cross this line, I know." Stella pulled back enough to look him in the eyes. "I know what I'm doing. I know what I want. And I want you." The last thread of his control snapped. He stood, lifting her with him, and carried her through the penthouse to his bedroom, set her down gently on the edge of the bed, and knelt in front of her, his hands on her knees. "Tell me if you want to stop," he said. "Any time, for any reason. Promise me." "I promise." He kissed her again, his hands careful as they found the zipper of her dress. Stella's fingers worked at the buttons of his shirt, frustrated by how many there were, by the layers between them. "Impatient?" Dominic asked against her lips, amusement coloring his voice. "Very." He laughed, actually laughed, and helped her, shrugging out of the shirt and pulling her dress over her head in one smooth motion. Then he stopped, his eyes traveling over her, and Stella fought the urge to cover herself. "You're beautiful," he said quietly. "Perfect." "I'm not." "You are." His fingers traced the faint scars on her shoulder, remnants of Derek's violence. His expression darkened. "He did this?" "It doesn't matter anymore." "It does." Dominic leaned in, pressing gentle kisses to each scar. "It matters because it hurt you, because it reminds me why I need to keep you safe." Stella's breath caught. Derek had hated her scars, had blamed her for them, called them ugly. But Dominic was treating them like something precious, like they were part of her story rather than something to be ashamed of. "Make me forget," she whispered. "Please, make me forget everything but this." He did, with touches that were reverent and possessive all at once, with whispered words in Italian that she didn't understand but felt in her bones, with a tenderness that made her want to cry and a passion that made her forget her own name. Afterward, Stella lay wrapped in Dominic's arms, her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her back, and she'd never felt safer in her entire life. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I'm keeping you," he said simply. "That you're mine now, and I'm yours, and nothing else matters." "That's very possessive." "I'm a possessive man." He tilted her face up to look at him. "Is that a problem?" Stella thought about how to answer. With anyone else, possessiveness would terrify her. But Dominic's brand of possession felt different, less like ownership and more like devotion, less like control and more like commitment. "Ask me again in the morning," she said. He smiled and pulled her closer. "I will. Every morning for the rest of our lives." It should have scared her, that level of certainty. Instead, Stella found herself smiling against his chest. They fell asleep tangled together, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Stella's dreams were peaceful. She woke to morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the smell of coffee. Dominic was already awake, standing by the window in low-slung sweatpants, talking quietly on his phone. When he saw her stirring, he ended the call and brought her a cup of coffee. "Good morning," he said, settling beside her on the bed. "Morning." Stella accepted the coffee gratefully. "You're up early." "Habit. I don't sleep much." He brushed hair back from her face. "How do you feel?" "Good. Really good, actually." She took a sip of coffee. Perfect. Exactly how she liked it. "Did you mean what you said last night?" "Which part?" "All of it, but especially the part about every morning for the rest of our lives." Dominic's expression grew serious. "I don't say things I don't mean, Stella. When I say you're mine, when I say I'm keeping you, when I say forever, I mean it. All of it." "That's intense." "I warned you I was an intense person." He took her free hand, threading their fingers together. "But if it's too much, if you need space, no." Stella set down her coffee and moved to straddle his lap, her hands framing his face. "No space, no backing away. I'm all in, Dominic, completely." The smile he gave her could have powered the entire city. He kissed her deeply, thoroughly, until they were both breathless and the coffee was forgotten. I have a meeting at 11, he said eventually, regret coloring his voice. But tonight, I want to take you somewhere. Where? You'll see. He kissed her again, quick and sweet. Trust me? Yes, Stella said, and realized she meant it completely. The meeting must have gone well because when Dominic picked her up that evening, he seemed lighter somehow, more at ease than she'd ever seen him. Vincent drove them to a neighborhood Stella didn't recognize, industrial buildings giving way to converted lofts and art galleries. They stopped in front of a brick building with large windows and a for-lease sign out front. What are we doing here? Stella asked as Dominic helped her out of the car. Come see. He led her inside through an entry hall and into a large open space. It was empty now, but Stella could see the bones of what it had been. A restaurant once upon a time. The kitchen was still intact, commercial grade and beautiful. The dining area had good light, high ceilings, space for maybe 40 tables. It closed 6 months ago, Dominic said, watching her face. The owner retired, couldn't find a buyer. It's been sitting empty ever since. Stella walked through the space, her chef's mind already cataloging possibilities. The kitchen layout was good, could be great with some updates. The location was up and coming, the kind of neighborhood where a good restaurant could thrive. Why are you showing me this? She asked, though she thought she knew. Because you told me Derek convinced you to give up your dream of opening a restaurant. Dominic moved to stand beside her, and I think it's time you got that dream back. Stella's breath caught. Dominic, I can't. Why not? Because I don't have the capital, the experience running a business, You have the talent, you have the passion. The rest we can figure out. He turned her to face him. I'm not saying it'll be easy. Starting a restaurant never is. But you're good enough, Stella. You're more than good enough. This isn't just about me getting my dream back, Stella said slowly. Is it? No, he admitted. It's also about giving you something that's yours. Something separate from me, from my world. A place where you can be just Stella the chef, not Stella who's with Dominic Russo. The thought made her throat tight. That's very thoughtful. I'm a thoughtful man when properly motivated. He smiled slightly. So what do you think? Want to take a chance? Stella looked around the space again, imagining it filled with people, filled with life, filled with food she'd created. It was everything she'd wanted before Derek had slowly convinced her she wasn't good enough, smart enough, talented enough. But Dominic thought she was. And maybe it was time she started believing it too. Yes, she said. Yes, I want to take a chance. The kiss he gave her was full of promise and pride, and something that felt dangerously close to love. They spent the next hour walking through the space, Dominic taking notes on her ideas, asking questions about equipment and staffing and concept. He was surprisingly knowledgeable about the restaurant business, and Stella realized he must have done this research specifically for her. There's one condition, he said as they were leaving. What's that? You name it something that has nothing to do with me. This is your restaurant, your dream. I'm just the investor. Silent partner? Stella asked. Very silent. I'll handle the business side, permits, licenses, investors if you need them. But the creative decisions, the menu, the staff, the vision, that's all you. It was more than she'd ever dared hope for, more than she deserved. Thank you, she said quietly, for believing in me. Always, Dominic said. I'll always believe in you. They were walking back to the car when Stella's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her slide the screen. Hello? Stella. Derek's voice sent ice down her spine. We need to talk. She stopped walking. Dominic, who'd been holding her hand, immediately tensed. I have nothing to say to you, Stella said, proud of how steady her voice sounded. Really? Because I think you'll want to hear this. Derek's tone was smug. I know about your new boyfriend, the dangerous one who thinks he can scare me off. And I have to tell you, sweetheart, he's made a very big mistake. Derek, tomorrow night, midnight, the old steel mill on the waterfront. Come alone or I start making trouble for Mr. Russo. Real trouble. The kind that gets people killed. The line went dead. Stella stood frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear. Dominic gently took it from her, his expression deadly calm. What did he say? Dominic asked. Stella told him, watched as his expression shifted from calm to cold fury in the space of a heartbeat. Absolutely not, he said. You're not going anywhere near that meeting. He said he'd make trouble. Let him try. Dominic pulled out his own phone, already dialing. Vincent, we have a problem. And just like that, Stella's peaceful morning shattered into 1,000 pieces. The war she'd been trying to avoid had finally found her. The ride back to Dominic's penthouse was silent, except for the rapid-fire conversations he conducted in clipped tones, calling in favors, mobilizing resources, assembling what Stella realized was essentially a small army. She sat in the back seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, watching the city blur past and trying not to think about what Derek might be planning. Vincent drove with his usual efficiency, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes constantly scanned the streets around them. They weren't just being careful anymore, they were on high alert. When they reached the penthouse, Dominic barely waited for the elevator doors to close before he had his phone out again, this time on speaker. Tell me you have something, he said without preamble. Working on it, boss. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar to Stella, younger and slightly nervous. Derek Chen, originally from Chicago, moved to New York 2 weeks ago. He's been staying at the Riverside Hotel under an assumed name, but we tracked his credit cards. He's not working alone. Stella's stomach dropped. What do you mean, not alone? There are at least 3 other men with him. Ex-military, from what we can tell. Professional. The voice paused. He's not playing around, Mr. Russo. This is a coordinated operation. Dominic's expression was carved from ice. Find out who's backing him. Nobody hires ex-military muscle without serious money behind them. Already on it. I'll have something for you within the hour. The call ended. Dominic stood by the windows, his hands in his pockets, staring out at the city. Stella could see the wheels turning behind his eyes, calculating angles and probabilities and risks. You're thinking of going yourself, she said quietly. I'm thinking of ending this. He turned to face her. Derek made a mistake calling you directly. It means he's desperate, which makes him dangerous, and it means he doesn't understand who he's dealing with. Or maybe he understands perfectly and doesn't care. Stella moved to stand beside him. You heard what they said. He has professional backing. What if this is a trap? Then I'll spring it with my eyes open. His hand found hers. I'm not letting him threaten you, Stella. Not now, not ever. So what? You're just going to show up at that steel mill and what, kill him? The blunt question hung in the air between them. Dominic didn't flinch from it. If necessary, yes. Stella had known, intellectually, what Dominic was capable of, had understood that his world operated on different rules, that violence was a tool he used when needed. But hearing him say it so calmly, so matter-of-factly, made it real in a way nothing else had. There has to be another way, she said. There isn't. Not with men like Derek. Dominic's jaw tightened. He's had weeks to walk away. I made it very clear what would happen if he came near you again. He chose to ignore that warning. Now he faces the consequences. And if he has information on you, if he goes to the police, let him. I have enough people in my pocket that it won't matter. He pulled her closer. This isn't your first instinct talking, to try to find a peaceful solution. I understand that. But some men only understand violence. Derek is one of them. Stella wanted to argue, wanted to insist that there had to be a better way. But she thought about the Derek she'd known, about the escalating violence, the complete inability to accept no for an answer. Dominic was right. Derek wouldn't stop unless someone made him stop. I'm coming with you, she said. Absolutely not. He called me. He wants me there. If I don't show up, he might do something unpredictable. She held Dominic's gaze. And before you say no, remember what you promised me, that you'd let me make my own decisions, that we're partners. Dominic looked like he wanted to argue, his protective instincts clearly warring with his promise to trust her judgment. Finally, he closed his eyes briefly. If you come, you stay in the car with Vincent. No arguments, no heroics. At the first sign of trouble, Vincent drives you out of there. Agreed. It wasn't ideal, but it was more than she'd expected. Agreed. The rest of the day passed in tense preparation. Men came and went from the penthouse. Serious men in dark suits who spoke in low voices and carried themselves like soldiers. Vincent coordinated logistics while Dominic made call after call, assembling his forces. Stella felt useless in the middle of it all, so she retreated to the kitchen and did what she always did when stressed. She cooked. She made pasta from scratch, kneading dough until her hands ached and her mind quieted. Made sauce that filled the penthouse with the smell of garlic and basil and tomatoes. Set the table for two, even though she wasn't sure either of them would have any appetite. When Dominic finally emerged from his office around 8, he stopped in the doorway of the kitchen, looking at the spread she'd created with something like wonder. "You cooked," he said. "I needed to do something." Stella wiped her hands on a towel. "I know you probably don't want to eat, but I'd love to eat." He crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. "Thank you." They sat at the dining table, and for a little while, it felt almost normal. Dominic asked about her menu ideas for the restaurant, and Stella found herself talking about flavor profiles and seasonal ingredients while they ate. It was surreal, discussing white truffle risotto while armed men waited in the next room, but also grounding, a reminder that life existed beyond this crisis. "You're going to be incredible," Dominic said, watching her gesture enthusiastically about a dish she wanted to create. "The restaurant is going to be everything you dreamed of." "If we survive tomorrow," Stella said, then immediately regretted it when his expression darkened. "We will." He reached across the table to take her hand. "I promise you, we will." At 11:30, they left the penthouse. Vincent drove with Stella and Dominic in the back seat. 2 more cars followed, one ahead, one behind, filled with Dominic's people. It felt like a military convoy heading into battle. The old steel mill was exactly the kind of place you'd expect for an illegal confrontation. Abandoned, isolated, surrounded by rusted equipment and broken windows. Vincent pulled up about 50 yards from the main entrance, the other cars positioning themselves strategically around the perimeter. "Stay here," Dominic said to Stella, his hand cupping her face. "No matter what happens, you stay in this car. Vincent will keep you safe." "Be careful," she whispered. "Always." He kissed her, long and deep and full of promise. And then he was gone, stepping out into the night with 6 men at his back. Stella watched through the tinted windows as they approached the mill entrance. The moonlight cast long shadows, making everything look sinister and strange. She could see movement inside the building, Derek's people probably, getting into position. "This is a bad idea," Vincent muttered from the front seat. "Then why did he agree to it?" "Because you asked him to let you come. Mr. Russo would walk into hell if you asked him to." Vincent's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. "He loves you, you know, really loves you. I've never seen him like this with anyone." The words made Stella's throat tight. "I love him too." "Then you understand why this is so dangerous. Love makes people do stupid things, takes calculated risks, and turns them into suicide missions." He paused. "If something goes wrong, I'm driving you out of here. Boss's orders. You don't argue, you don't fight me, you just let me get you to safety. Clear?" "Clear." Inside the mill, Stella could see flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. Dominic's tall form was visible in the center, flanked by his men. Then from the far side of the building, another group emerged. Derek was in the center, looking smaller than she remembered. The men with him were bigger, harder, clearly professional muscle. One of them carried what looked like a rifle. Stella's heart stopped. "Vincent, I see it." His hand was already on the gear shift. "If shooting starts, we're gone." Through the cracked windows of the mill, Stella could hear raised voices, though she couldn't make out the words. Dominic's posture was relaxed, almost casual, but she knew him well enough now to recognize the coiled tension beneath the surface. Derek was gesturing wildly, his voice carrying across the distance. Even from here, Stella could hear the edge of desperation, of rage barely contained. Then Derek pulled something from his jacket, a gun, and pointed it at Dominic. "Go!" Vincent shouted at the same moment. Every instinct in Stella's body screamed at her to run, but she couldn't move, could only watch in frozen horror as the scene played out. Dominic didn't flinch, didn't even seem concerned about the gun pointed at his chest. He said something, too quiet for Stella to hear, and Derek's hand wavered. One of Derek's men moved forward, putting a hand on his shoulder. Trying to calm him down, maybe, or trying to take control of a situation spiraling out of hand. Derek shook him off and fired. The gunshot echoed across the waterfront like thunder. Stella screamed, her hand flying to her mouth. Vincent was already throwing the car in reverse, but Stella grabbed his shoulder. "Wait!" Because Dominic was still standing. The bullet had missed, Derek's hand shaking too badly to aim properly. And in the chaos that followed, Dominic's men moved with military precision. They disarmed Derek's people in seconds, professional efficiency overcoming desperate violence. Derek himself was on his knees, the gun kicked away, Dominic standing over him like an avenging angel. Stella couldn't stay in the car anymore. She was out the door before Vincent could stop her, running across the cracked pavement toward the mill. She heard Vincent cursing behind her, heard him calling for backup, but she didn't stop. She reached the entrance just as Dominic was hauling Derek to his feet by his collar. "You had your chance," Dominic was saying, his voice deadly quiet. "I told you what would happen if you came near her again. You didn't listen." "She's mine," Derek spat blood. "You can't just take her." "She was never yours. She was a person you hurt, controlled, destroyed. But she got away. She survived you. And now she's thriving." Dominic's hand tightened. "And you can't stand it." "Dominic!" Stella's voice cut through the tension. He turned, and the fury in his eyes shifted immediately to concern. "Stella, you need to get back in the car." "No." She walked forward, past Dominic's men, past the disarmed mercenaries, until she was standing in front of Derek. "I need to say something." Derek's eyes lit up with sick hope. "Baby, I knew you'd come. Tell him you're coming home with me. I'm not your baby. I'm not your anything." Stella's voice was steady, stronger than she'd ever heard it. "For a year and a half, you made me believe I was nothing, that I was weak, worthless, lucky that someone like you would even look at me. You broke me down piece by piece until I couldn't recognize myself anymore. I loved you. You don't know what love is. Love doesn't leave bruises. Love doesn't destroy. Love doesn't make you afraid to breathe wrong." She took a step closer. "But I do know what love is now. I found someone who sees me as a person, not a possession. Who wants me to be strong, not weak. Who builds me up instead of tearing me down." Derek's face contorted with rage. "Him? You think he loves you? He's a criminal, Stella. A murderer. He'll use you and throw you away just like everyone else." "Maybe," Stella said quietly, "but at least he'll give me the choice. At least he'll treat me like I matter." She looked him directly in the eyes. "You're pathetic, Derek. You're so terrified of being alone that you'd rather destroy someone than let them go. And I'm done being afraid of you." She turned to Dominic. "I'm ready to leave now." Dominic's expression was fierce with pride and love, and something that looked almost like awe. He nodded to his men, who immediately began securing Derek and his mercenaries. "What are you going to do with them?" Stella asked as Dominic led her toward the car. "Derek will wake up tomorrow in a federal holding cell, facing charges for the mercenaries he hired, all of whom have outstanding warrants. His money will be frozen, his connections severed. By the time he gets out of prison, he'll be too old and broken to bother anyone." Dominic's arm was solid around her shoulders. "And if he ever comes near you again, I'll finish what I started tonight." It should have scared her, that casual promise of violence. Instead, Stella felt only relief. Vincent was waiting by the car, looking furious. "You have a death wish?" he demanded. "Probably," Stella admitted. "Definitely," Dominic added, but he was smiling slightly as he helped her into the back seat. The drive back was quieter than the drive out. Stella sat pressed against Dominic's side, his arm around her, both of them processing what had just happened. "I'm sorry," she said finally, "for not staying in the car." "Don't be. What you said to Derek, that took more courage than anything I did tonight." His hand found hers, threading their fingers together. "I'm proud of you. He could have shot you. He could have, but he didn't." Dominic tilted her face up to look at him. "And now he can't hurt you anymore. It's over, Stella. Really over." The words didn't quite feel real yet. 6 months of running, weeks of fear, and now it was just over. Derek was going to prison. She was safe. She was free. She started crying, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. Dominic pulled her into his lap, holding her tight while she fell apart, murmuring reassurances in Italian that she didn't understand but felt in her bones. By the time they reached the penthouse, she was wrung out and exhausted. Dominic carried her to bed, helped her out of her clothes, and held her while she cried herself to sleep. She woke the next morning to sunlight and the smell of coffee, and Dominic watching her with an expression so tender it made her chest ache. "Good morning," he said softly. "Is it?" Stella's voice was hoarse from crying. "Is it really over?" "It's really over. Derek's in federal custody. The mercenaries he hired are cooperating to reduce their sentences. Turns out he hired them with embezzled money from his company. He's facing 10 to 15 years minimum." Dominic brushed hair back from her face. "You're safe now, completely safe." The relief that washed through her was so intense it was almost painful. "I don't know what to do now." "Now?" Dominic smiled. "Now you live your life. You open your restaurant. You chase your dreams. You let yourself be happy. With you. If you'll have me." His thumb traced her lower lip. "I know I'm not an easy man to be with. I know my world is complicated and dangerous. But I love you, Stella Chen, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that love doesn't have to hurt." Stella's eyes filled with fresh tears, but these were different. These were happy tears. "I love you too," she whispered. "So much it scares me." "Good. We can be scared together." He kissed her gently. "What do you say we stay in bed all day and figure out the rest later?" "I say that sounds perfect." They spent the day wrapped around each other, talking and laughing and making love and planning a future that suddenly seemed possible. Dominic called in architects to look at the restaurant space. Stella sketched menu ideas on napkins. They argued playfully about whether the pasta course should come before or after the fish, whether the dining room should have booths or just tables, whether white truffle oil was pretentious or essential. It was the most normal, wonderful, perfect day Stella could remember. As the sun set, painting the penthouse in shades of gold and amber, Dominic pulled her onto the balcony. The city spread out below them, millions of lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering darkness. "I have something for you," he said. "Dominic, you've already given me too much. It's not about money." He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Stella's heart stopped. "Before you panic, this isn't a ring. Not yet, anyway. I know it's too soon for that." He opened the box to reveal a delicate necklace, a simple gold chain with a small pendant. When Stella looked closer, she realized the pendant was a tiny chef's knife, exquisitely detailed. "For the chef who saved my life," Dominic said quietly, "who reminded me what it means to be human, who made me believe in second chances." Stella's hands trembled as he fastened it around her neck. "It's beautiful." "So are you." He turned her to face him, his hands framing her face. "I need you to know something. What we have, this isn't temporary for me. This isn't some infatuation that'll fade. You're it for me, Stella. The person I want to wake up next to for the rest of my life. The person I want to build a future with." "That's very intense," Stella said, echoing her words from weeks ago. "I warned you I was an intense person." He smiled. "Still not a problem?" "Still not a problem." She pulled him down for a kiss. "Ask me." "Ask you what?" "Ask me what you wanted to ask before you chickened out and gave me a necklace instead." Dominic laughed, the sound full of joy and relief. "I didn't chicken out. I'm being strategic, giving you time to be sure." "I'm sure." Stella met his eyes. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life, so ask me." He searched her face for a long moment, and Stella saw the exact second he decided to take the leap. He dropped to one knee right there on the balcony, the city lights glittering behind him like stars. "Stella Chen, will you marry me?" He pulled a ring from another pocket. He'd been carrying it all along, she realized, and held it up. "Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that love can be gentle, that it can build instead of destroy, that it can set you free instead of trapping you?" The ring was perfect, a simple solitaire diamond that caught the light and threw rainbows across the balcony. But it was his face that made her say yes. The vulnerability in his eyes, the hope, the love written across every feature. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and then he was standing, lifting her, spinning her around while she laughed and held on tight. When he finally set her down, he kissed her with such intensity that Stella forgot where she was, forgot everything except the feeling of being loved and cherished and seen. "I promise you," Dominic said against her lips, "I will spend every day earning this, earning you." You already have, Stella said. You already have. That night, they called their friends to share the news. Vincent's response was a dry "about time." Gloria's was genuine warmth and an immediate offer to help plan the wedding. Marco from Santino's kitchen laughed and said he'd known from the moment they met in the freezer that they were inevitable. Margaret from the shelter cried happy tears and told Stella she was proud of her. Proud of how far she'd come, how strong she'd become, how she'd chosen to heal instead of staying broken. And in a federal holding cell across the city, Derek Chen learned that the woman he'd tried so hard to control was getting married to the man he'd tried to threaten. The news reports would say he had a breakdown, that he had to be sedated, that he screamed her name for hours. But Stella didn't hear about that until much later. And by then, it didn't matter anymore. She'd spent too long living in fear of Derek's reactions, Derek's violence, Derek's inability to let go. She was done giving him space in her head, done letting him have power over her emotions. She was free. Finally, completely, gloriously free. And she was going to spend the rest of her life being happy about it. 2 weeks later, Stella stood in the empty restaurant space, watching contractors install new equipment in the kitchen. The place was taking shape, slowly but surely. The dining room had been painted a warm cream color that caught the light beautifully. The kitchen gleamed with new stainless steel, and in the corner, a small table was already set up where she and Dominic could test menu items. "It's coming together," Gloria said, appearing beside her with coffee. "You should be proud." "I'm terrified," Stella admitted. "What if I fail? What if people hate the food? What if people love it and you become wildly successful and have to open a second location?" Gloria smiled. "Stella, you're going to be fine. Better than fine. You're going to be incredible." The bell over the door chimed, and Dominic walked in, still in his suit from a morning meeting. He crossed directly to Stella and kissed her, seemingly unbothered by Gloria's amused expression. "How's my favorite chef?" he asked, panicking appropriately. "Good. Means you care." He handed her a folder. "Permits came through. You're officially licensed to open." Stella's hands trembled as she took the folder. "Really? Really? You could open as soon as you're ready." He pulled her close. "Though I'd recommend a soft opening first. Friends and family, work out the kinks, that sort of thing." "That's actually a good idea." She looked around the space at the dream that was becoming reality. "I can't believe this is happening." "Believe it." Dominic's hand found the small of her back. "This is your talent, your vision, your dream. I just helped make it possible." "You did more than help. I invested in a sure thing." He kissed her forehead. "And I expect a return in the form of excellent pasta for the rest of my life." Stella laughed, feeling lighter than she had in days. "I think that can be arranged." They spent the afternoon menu testing, filling the empty restaurant with the smell of cooking food and the sound of laughter. Dominic turned out to be an excellent taste tester, his palate surprisingly refined. He made her laugh with his dramatic reactions to successful dishes and his theatrical dismay at ones that needed work. "Too much lemon," he declared after trying her fish special. "You're not wrong." Stella made a note. "But how did you know?" "I pay attention." He pulled her onto his lap, despite Gloria's eye roll from across the room. "Plus, I've been eating at the best restaurants in the city for 20 years. You pick things up." "Speaking of restaurants," Stella said, an idea forming. "What if we did a collaboration dinner? Santino's and my place, one night only, special menu, all proceeds to charity." Dominic's eyes lit up. "That's brilliant. What charity?" "Domestic violence prevention. Shelters for women fleeing abuse." She met his gaze. "Margaret's place could use the funding." "Done." He kissed her soundly. "See? You're not just a talented chef. You're a brilliant businesswoman." "I'm learning from the best." "Damn right you are." As the sun set, painting the restaurant in golden light, Stella looked around at everything she'd built, was still building, and felt a sense of peace she'd never experienced before. The restaurant was taking shape. Her relationship with Dominic was growing stronger every day. Derek was behind bars where he belonged. She was safe. She was loved. She was home. "What are you thinking?" Dominic asked, reading her expression. "That I'm happy," Stella said simply. "For the first time in longer than I can remember, I'm just happy." "Good." He stood, pulling her up with him. Because you deserve to be happy. You deserve everything good this world has to offer. I have everything I want right here. Sap, he teased, but his eyes were soft. Your sap, she countered. My sap, my chef, my fiancé, my everything. He pulled her close, swaying slightly to music only he could hear. God, I love you. I love you too. They danced in the empty restaurant while Gloria cleaned up in the kitchen, two people who'd found each other against all odds, who'd built something beautiful from broken pieces. And outside, the city hummed with evening energy, full of possibilities and promise, and second chances for those brave enough to take them. The restaurant's soft opening was scheduled for a Friday evening, 3 months after that night at the steel mill. Stella had invited 20 guests, friends, family, people who'd supported her journey from hiding in Santino's kitchen to standing in her own place, her own dream made real. She was in the kitchen at 5 a.m, prepping alongside the small team she'd assembled. Marco had agreed to be her sous chef, leaving Santino's for the chance to help build something from the ground up. 2 line cooks she'd trained personally moved with practiced efficiency, and a young pastry chef named Riley hummed while she worked on desserts. You're going to wear a hole in those carrots, Marco observed, watching Stella dice the same vegetables for the 3rd time. I'm nervous. You're terrified, he corrected. But that's good. Means you care. Everyone keeps saying that. Stella set down her knife and looked around the kitchen. Her kitchen. Everything gleamed, organized exactly the way she wanted it. The menu was perfect, tested and retested until every dish sang. Her team was solid. The dining room looked beautiful, all warm lighting and elegant simplicity. So why did she feel like she was about to jump off a cliff? Because it's real now, Marco said, reading her mind. Because this is your name on the door, your vision, your dream. That's scary as hell. But you're ready, Stella. More than ready. The back door opened and Dominic walked in, carrying coffee and looking unfairly handsome in jeans and a sweater. He'd taken the day off, something he never did, to be here for her. Morning, beautiful, he said, kissing her thoroughly, despite Marco's pointed cough. How's my favorite chef? Ask me again in 12 hours. I will. He handed her the coffee. I also brought reinforcements. Vincent appeared behind him, followed by Gloria and Margaret and a dozen other people from Santino's, all ready to help however they could. Stella felt her eyes sting with grateful tears. You didn't have to do this, she said. We know, Gloria replied. We wanted to. Now put us to work. The next few hours passed in controlled chaos. Tables were set, wine was decanted, last-minute adjustments were made to the menu. Stella ran through her mise en place one final time, checking and rechecking until Marco physically removed the checklist from her hands. It's done, he said firmly. Everything is perfect. Now go get changed before your guests arrive. Dominic was waiting in the small office that doubled as a changing room. He'd brought her a dress, midnight blue silk that reminded her of the first dinner they'd attended together, a lifetime ago. You remembered, she said softly. I remember everything about you. He helped her with the zipper, his fingers trailing along her spine in a way that made her shiver. How are you feeling? Like I might throw up. That's my girl. He turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders. Stella, look at me. She did, meeting those dark eyes that had seen her at her worst and loved her anyway. You've already survived the hard part, Dominic said quietly. You survived Derek, survived running, survived being broken and putting yourself back together. Opening a restaurant? That's easy compared to what you've already done. It doesn't feel easy. Because it matters. Because you're putting yourself out there, making yourself vulnerable. His thumb brushed her cheek. But you're not alone anymore. I'm here. Marco's here. Everyone out there is here because they believe in you, so believe in yourself. Stella took a shaky breath and nodded. Okay, I can do this. Damn right you can. The first guests arrived at 7. Stella watched from the kitchen as they filled the dining room. Friends from Santino's, Margaret, and women from the shelter, Vincent, and some of Dominic's people who'd become friends over the past months. And at the center table, looking proud enough to burst, sat Dominic with his phone already out to document everything. First ticket, Marco called, and just like that, service began. The next 3 hours were a blur of heat and motion and adrenaline. Stella worked her station with practiced precision, calling orders and plating dishes and tasting everything before it went out. The kitchen hummed with energy, her team moving like they'd worked together for years instead of weeks. Between courses, she'd peek out at the dining room, watch people's faces as they tasted her food, see them close their eyes in pleasure, reach for more bread to soak up sauce, lean across the table to steal bites from their companions' plates. And every time she looked, Dominic was watching her with an expression that made her heart stutter. The final course went out at 10:30, a delicate panna cotta with roasted figs that Riley had perfected. Stella allowed herself to breathe for the first time in hours, leaning against the counter while her team cleaned up around her. "We did it," Marco said, appearing beside her with 2 glasses of wine. "And it was fucking perfect." "Language," Stella said automatically, but she was grinning. "Sorry, chef." He clinked his glass against hers. "But seriously, that was one of the best meals I've ever been part of. You should be proud." She was. Terrified and exhausted and covered in various food stains, but also deeply, fiercely proud. Dominic came into this kitchen as the last guests were leaving, pulling her into his arms, despite her protests about being sweaty and smelling like garlic. "You were magnificent," he said against her hair. "Every single person out there was blown away." "Really? Really?" Vincent said it was the best Italian food he's had outside of Sicily. Gloria cried over the risotto. "And Margaret told me to tell you that watching you tonight made everything she does worthwhile." He pulled back to look at her. "You did it, Stella. You made your dream real." The tears she'd been holding back all night finally spilled over. Dominic held her while she cried. Happy tears this time. Pure relief and joy, and the overwhelming realization that she'd actually done it. She'd survived Derek, built a new life, and created something beautiful from the ashes of who she used to be. "I love you," she said when she could speak again. "Thank you for believing in me." "Always," Dominic said simply. "I'll always believe in you." They closed up the restaurant together, Stella saying goodbye to her team and making plans for the official opening in 2 weeks. By the time they got back to the penthouse, it was after midnight and Stella was running on pure adrenaline. "I'm too wired to sleep," she admitted, pacing the living room while Dominic poured them both whiskey. "I have something that might help." He handed her the glass and pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. "I was going to wait until tomorrow, but I think now is better." Stella opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a single piece of paper, a legal document declaring Derek's parental rights terminated in perpetuity, along with a restraining order that would remain in effect even after his prison sentence ended. "How did you—" "I have lawyers, good ones." Dominic sat beside her on the couch. "Derek can't come near you, can't contact you, can't even speak your name in public without violating the order. And if he does, he goes right back to prison. You're free of him, Stella. Completely and legally free." The words didn't quite register at first. 6 months ago, she'd been convinced she'd never be free, that Derek would always find her, always have some hold over her life. But now, with this single piece of paper, that chapter was finally, truly closed. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything." Dominic set aside their glasses and pulled her into his lap. "Just be happy. That's all I want. For you to be happy and safe and free to live your life however you choose." "I choose this," Stella said, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I choose you, this life, everything we're building together." "Good. Because I'm not letting you go." He kissed her softly. "Speaking of building together, I have a proposal." "Another one? You already proposed once." "Different kind of proposal." His eyes sparkled with something that looked like mischief. "What would you say to getting married next month?" Stella blinked. "Next month? That's so soon." "I know, but here's my thinking." He shifted her so they were face to face. "The restaurant is opening, you're going to be insanely busy, and I don't want to wait years to make you my wife. I want to wake up every morning knowing you're mine legally, officially, in every way that matters." "That's very romantic, and also slightly possessive." "I'm a possessive man," he said, echoing their conversation from months ago. "Still a problem?" Stella thought about it. A small wedding, Soon, before the chaos of running a restaurant consumed her life, and starting their marriage at the same time she was starting this new chapter. It felt right, somehow, symmetrical. "No," she said, "it's not a problem. But I have a condition." "Name it." "Small wedding, really small, just the people who matter most." "Done. What else?" "And we honeymoon somewhere I can cook. I want to learn regional techniques, explore markets, eat everything." Dominic laughed, the sound rich and warm. "Only you would plan a working honeymoon. But yes, absolutely. We'll go to Italy, eat our way through Tuscany, and you can learn all the pasta-making secrets you want." "Then yes," Stella said. "Let's get married next month." He kissed her then, deep and thorough and full of promise. When they finally came up for air, Dominic was grinning like he'd won the lottery. "I'll have Vincent start making arrangements tomorrow," he said. "Vincent's going to think we're crazy." "Vincent already thinks we're crazy. He's not wrong." They spent the rest of the night planning, not the wedding details, but their future. The restaurant and Dominic's legitimate business ventures, where they'd live, whether the penthouse or somewhere new. Children, eventually, though neither was quite ready for that conversation yet. The foundation they wanted to start, using Dominic's resources to help women like Stella escape abusive situations. As dawn broke over the city, Stella found herself on the balcony with coffee, watching the world wake up. Dominic joined her, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything. How different my life is now compared to 6 months ago." She leaned back against his chest. 6 months ago, I was hiding in a kitchen, terrified Derek would find me. Now I have my own restaurant, I'm marrying the love of my life, and I actually believe in happy endings." "We're definitely getting one," Dominic said firmly. "How can you be so sure?" "Because I won't accept anything less." His arms tightened around her. "I've done a lot of bad things in my life, Stella. Hurt people, made choices I'm not proud of. But you're my chance to do something right, to be someone better, and I'm not wasting that chance." The next month passed in a whirlwind. The restaurant's official opening was a massive success, with reservations booked solid for 3 months. Critics raved about Stella's innovative take on classic Italian cuisine. A prominent food magazine called her a rising star worth watching. Through it all, Dominic was her anchor. He'd show up after service with food from her competitors, not to criticize, but to help her stay current, understand the market. He'd rub her feet when she was too exhausted to move. He'd test new menu items and offer honest feedback. And every night, he'd remind her that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The wedding planning was shockingly simple. They'd decided on a ceremony at the restaurant after hours, just 30 people. Stella would wear a simple white dress. Dominic would wear his best suit. Marco would cater, though Stella planned to make the wedding cake herself, a 7-layer Italian cream cake that had taken her weeks to perfect. The night before the wedding, Stella stayed at Margaret's shelter, a nod to tradition, but also a chance to spend time with the women who'd helped her survive her darkest moments. "I'm so proud of you," Margaret said, watching Stella pack up her things. "When you first showed up here, you were so broken, so scared, and look at you now." "I couldn't have done it without you," Stella said, honestly. "Without this place, without your kindness. You did the hard part. You chose to heal." Margaret pulled her into a hug. "Now go marry that man and be happy. You've earned it." The wedding day dawned clear and bright. Stella woke early, too excited to sleep, and spent the morning cooking. The cake came out perfect, layers of vanilla cake with cream cheese frosting and fresh berries. She delivered it to the restaurant personally, then went back to get ready. Gloria helped her dress, pinning her hair up in a simple style that showed off the necklace Dominic had given her months ago. The dress was elegant simplicity, white silk with a fitted bodice and flowing skirt. No veil, no elaborate train. Just Stella, as she was, ready to marry the man she loved. "You look beautiful," Gloria said, her eyes suspiciously bright. "I feel beautiful," Stella admitted. "For the first time in my life, I actually feel beautiful." "That's because you are. Inside and out." Gloria squeezed her hand. "Now let's go get you married." The restaurant had been transformed. White flowers everywhere, candles glowing on every surface, the tables pushed aside to create space for the ceremony. 30 people, friends, family, the people who mattered most, stood waiting. And at the front, Looking devastatingly handsome in a black suit stood Dominic. Their eyes met across the room, and Stella saw everything she needed to see in his expression. Love? Yes. Desire? Absolutely. But also respect, partnership, the promise of forever. She walked to him without music, without anyone giving her away. This was her choice, her decision, her future. And she was walking into it with her eyes wide open. The ceremony was short and sweet. They'd written their own vows, standing before their friends, and promising things that actually mattered. "I promise to be your partner, not your possession," Stella said, her voice steady. "To build you up, never tear you down. To choose you every day, even when it's hard. To love you with everything I am, everything I'm becoming." "I promise to protect you without controlling you," Dominic said, his eyes never leaving hers. "To trust your strength even when it scares me. To be worthy of your love every single day. To choose light over darkness, always, because you showed me it was possible." They exchanged rings, simple gold bands that felt like promises given physical form. And when the officiant pronounced them married, Dominic pulled Stella into his arms and kissed her like they were the only two people in the world. The reception was exactly what Stella had wanted. Good food, good wine, good people. Marco had outdone himself with the catering, creating dishes that somehow topped even Stella's opening night menu. The cake was demolished within an hour, people coming back for seconds and thirds. Vincent gave a toast that was surprisingly sentimental, talking about how he'd watched Dominic transform over the past months, becoming someone lighter, more human. "Stella didn't just save his life," Vincent said. "She gave him a reason to live it." Gloria's toast focused on Stella's journey, her courage, her refusal to stay broken. "You could have given up," Gloria said. "Could have let Derek win, let fear control you. Instead, you built a whole new life. You're an inspiration to everyone in this room." Margaret simply raised her glass and said, "To second chances and the courage to take them." As the evening wound down, Stella found herself on the restaurant's back patio with Dominic, both of them a little drunk on wine and happiness. "We did it," she said, leaning against him. "We did," Dominic agreed. "You're officially stuck with me now." "Good. I like being stuck with you." She looked up at the stars, barely visible through the city lights. "Can I tell you something?" "Anything. For the first time in my life, I'm not scared of tomorrow. Not scared of what might happen, who might show up, what might go wrong." She turned to face him. "You gave me that. The freedom to stop being afraid." "You gave that to yourself," Dominic corrected gently. "I just provided a safe space for you to heal. You did all the hard work." "We did it together." Stella touched his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw. "Everything we do from now on, we do together. Deal?" "Deal." He kissed her palm. "Ready to start our forever?" "More than ready." They left the restaurant hand in hand, rice and well wishes following them into the night. Vincent drove them to the airport, where a private plane waited to take them to Italy. As they settled into their seats, Stella looked at the wedding band on her finger and smiled. Mrs. Stella Russo. Chef, restaurant owner, survivor. Wife. The plane took off as dawn broke over the city, carrying them toward new adventures. Stella fell asleep with her head on Dominic's shoulder, dreaming of pasta and wine and lazy mornings in Tuscan villas. 3 weeks later, they returned tanned and happy, full of stories and recipes and plans for the future. The restaurant was thriving in their absence, Marco having proved himself more than capable of running things. Stella immediately threw herself back into work, implementing new dishes she'd learned in Italy. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. Work and home, passion and peace, building their empire together. Dominic began legitimizing more of his business operations, using Stella's restaurant as inspiration to invest in other legitimate ventures. He didn't abandon his world entirely, that would have been naive, but he shifted the balance, choosing legal over illegal wherever possible. 6 months after the wedding, Stella realized she was late. At first, she thought it was stress. The restaurant was expanding, they were looking at a second location, but then she took a test. Pregnant. She sat on the bathroom floor of the penthouse, staring at the positive result, trying to process the surge of emotions. Fear, yes. Joy, absolutely. but mostly just overwhelming love for this tiny possibility growing inside her. When Dominic came home that evening, she met him at the door with the test. "We need to talk," she said. His expression immediately shifted to concern. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. At least I don't think anything's wrong." She handed him the test. "I'm pregnant." Dominic stared at the plastic stick like it held the secrets of the universe. Then, slowly, his face transformed into pure joy. "You're sure?" he asked. "As sure as a drugstore test can be. I have a doctor's appointment next week to confirm, but—" She didn't get to finish the sentence because Dominic was kissing her, his hands gentle on her face, tears streaming down his cheeks. "We're having a baby," he said when they finally broke apart. "We're actually having a baby." "Are you happy?" Stella asked, suddenly uncertain. "Happy?" "Stella, I'm terrified and ecstatic and completely overwhelmed." He placed a hand on her still flat stomach. "But yes, I'm happy. So incredibly happy." They spent that night making plans, both practical and impossible. Converting the guest room into a nursery, teaching their child to cook, keeping them safe in a world that could be dangerous, building a future that was clean, legitimate, something they could be proud to pass down. "I want to be better for them," Dominic said as they lay in bed. "I want to be the kind of father they can look up to. That means walking away from the business. The illegal parts, at least." "Can you do that?" Stella asked. "Just walk away?" "I can do anything for you, for our family." He pulled her close. "It won't be easy. There will be people who aren't happy about it, but it's time. Past time, honestly." The transition took months. Dominic systematically divested from his illegal operations, selling off territory, settling old debts, making peace with rivals. Some of it required Vincent's particular talents for negotiation. Some of it required harder choices, the kind Stella tried not to think about too closely. But slowly, surely, Dominic Russo transformed from crime boss to legitimate businessman. He kept Santino's, expanded it into a small chain, invested in Stella's restaurant empire, because, yes, they'd opened 3 more locations by the time their daughter was born. Angela Rosa Russo came into the world on a snowy February morning, screaming her displeasure at being forced out of her warm, comfortable space. She had Dominic's dark hair and Stella's determined chin, and from the moment they placed her in Stella's arms, both parents were completely, irrevocably in love. "She's perfect," Dominic whispered, his finger carefully held in Angela's tiny fist. "She's ours," Stella said, wonder coloring her voice. They brought Angela home to a penthouse that had been completely baby-proofed, to a nursery painted soft yellow with hand-painted murals of Italian landscapes. Vincent brought flowers. Gloria brought meals for 2 weeks. Marco showed up with a teddy bear bigger than the baby. And through it all, Stella marveled at how far she'd come. From the broken woman hiding in a kitchen to this, a thriving chef, beloved wife, mother to this perfect tiny human. One night, when Angela was 3 months old, Stella woke to find Dominic's side of the bed empty. She found him in the nursery, holding their daughter against his chest, swaying gently while he hummed something in Italian. "She was fussing," he said quietly when he noticed Stella in the doorway. "Didn't want to wake you." Stella came to stand beside them, resting her head on Dominic's shoulder. Together, they looked down at their sleeping daughter. "I keep thinking about all the choices that led us here," Dominic said. "If you hadn't run to New York, if you hadn't hidden in Santino's, if you hadn't fallen in that freezer, we would have found each other somehow," Stella interrupted. "I believe that. We were meant to be, you and me." "You really think so?" "I know so." She kissed Angela's tiny forehead. "Look at her, Dominic. Look at what we made. This perfect, beautiful, innocent life. How could anything that leads to this be anything but fate?" He smiled, that soft smile he reserved only for his girls. "You make a compelling argument." They stood there for a long time, the 3 of them, a family forged from pain and survival and the courage to choose love over fear. Years later, Stella would look back on her journey with a mixture of amazement and pride. She'd survived Derek's abuse, rebuilt her life from nothing, created a restaurant empire that employed dozens and fed thousands, married a man who'd transformed himself from monster to devoted husband and father, Raised a daughter who was fearless and kind and absolutely convinced she could do anything. The scars were still there, physical and emotional reminders of darker times. But Stella had learned that scars were simply evidence of survival, proof that she'd been through hell and come out the other side. On Angela's 5th birthday, they threw a party at the original restaurant. The dining room was filled with children and laughter and the controlled chaos of too much sugar. Angela held court in the center of it all, her dark curls bouncing as she commanded her friends like a tiny general. "She's going to be trouble," Vincent observed, watching from the sidelines with obvious affection. "She already is," Dominic agreed, but his voice was full of pride. Stella emerged from the kitchen carrying the birthday cake, 5 layers of chocolate heaven that had taken her all morning to perfect. She set it in front of her daughter and stepped back, watching Angela's face light up. "Make a wish, baby," Stella said. Angela closed her eyes tight, her little face scrunched in concentration. Then she blew out all 5 candles in one breath, and everyone cheered. "What did you wish for?" one of her friends asked. "Can't tell," Angela said seriously, "or it won't come true." Later, after the party wound down and the last guest left, Stella found herself alone in the kitchen with Dominic, both of them stealing bites of leftover cake. "Do you ever think about that night in the freezer?" she asked. "When we first met?" "All the time." Dominic pulled her between his legs, his arms wrapping around her waist. "I think about how you looked at me like I was just a man, how you fell and I caught you, how I knew, even then, that you were going to change my life. I think about it too, about how scared I was, how lost, how I just wanted to disappear." She turned to face him. "I'm so glad I didn't." "Me too. I can't imagine my life without you, without Angela, without all of this." He gestured to the restaurant, to their life, to everything they'd built. "You saved me, Stella." "We saved each other," she corrected. From the dining room came the sound of Angela's laughter as she played with Vincent, who was teaching her some kind of card game. The sound was pure joy, completely innocent, untouched by the darkness that had once defined both her parents' lives. "She'll never know what we came from," Dominic said quietly. "She'll grow up safe, loved, never afraid of anything." "That's what we wanted," Stella reminded him, "to give her everything we didn't have." "I know, and we are." He pulled her closer. "I just hope she knows how lucky she is." "She will. We'll make sure of it." Stella kissed him softly. "And when she's old enough, we'll tell her our story, about how Mama was running and Papa was hiding and they found each other in the most unlikely place, how love can heal even the deepest wounds, how second chances are real if you're brave enough to take them." "That's a good story," Dominic said. "It's our story," Stella replied, "and it's not finished yet." They went home that night as a family, Dominic carrying a sleeping Angela while Stella gathered the mountain of birthday presents. The penthouse was quiet and peaceful, exactly the kind of home Stella had once dreamed of, but never believed she deserved. She tucked Angela into bed, kissing her forehead and whispering a prayer of gratitude for this perfect, fearless child. Then she joined Dominic on the balcony, looking out at the city that had become their home. "What are you thinking about?" Dominic asked, pulling her against his chest. "Everything. How far we've come. How different our lives are now." She turned to look up at him. "I'm happy, Dominic. Really, truly happy. And I never thought I'd be able to say that." "You deserve to be happy. You deserve everything good this world has to offer. I have everything I want right here." She gestured to the penthouse, to their sleeping daughter, to him. "This is enough. More than enough. It's everything," Dominic agreed. They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the city lights twinkle like stars. Two people who'd found each other in the darkness and built a life filled with light. Two broken people who'd learned that love didn't have to hurt, that protection didn't mean possession, that second chances were real. Inside, Angela slept peacefully, dreaming whatever 5-year-olds dream about. In the morning, she'd wake up to parents who adored her, to a life full of possibility and promise. She'd grow up knowing she was loved, valued, safe. And someday, when she was old enough to understand, they'd tell her the whole story. About the woman who ran from monsters and the man who used to be one. About the night they met in a freezer and how that single moment changed everything. About choosing love over fear, light over darkness, healing over breaking. But for tonight, Stella and Dominic simply held each other, grateful for the journey that had brought them here, excited for whatever came next. The woman who'd once hidden in a kitchen had built an empire. The man who'd ruled through fear had learned to lead with love, and together they'd created something beautiful, a family, a future, a life worth living. And as the city settled into sleep around them, Stella Chen Russo smiled and knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Home, safe, loved. Finally, completely, gloriously free.